Segment 1. Daily Life Immersion. Along the road Cedino, gently ease your mind into the rhythms of a medieval morning. A morning that might have begun centuries ago, yet feels so close when you let yourself drift toward it. Imagine the soft crunch of frosted grass under your feet, the muted hush that settles over an early dawn before the sun fully wakes the land. You are a road paver, a laborer whose back is as bent as the winding path you maintain, whose hands know the weight of stone better than they know the softness of a featherbed. Let your mind's eye settle on the simple shapes of this life. A worn tunic, a wooden-handled mallet, a small cloth bundle with bread and perhaps a wedge of cheese, if you're fortunate. You wake before first light, stirred not by a rooster's call but by the natural ache of your bones, which feel each day's work, long after the sun has set. You rise from a straw-stuffed pallet laid directly on earthen floor. A thin woolen blanket is all that shields you from the chill that seeps through gaps in the rough timber walls of your cottage. Outside, the village stirs slowly. Small cottages squat beside one another like tired old men leaning on canes. Smoke begins to curl from a few thatch-roofed chimneys. Thin trails that disappear into the pale sky. The air is cold enough to turn your breath into wispy clouds, and you tuck your hands under your armpits for warmth as you slip out into the lane. Today's section of road lies 2 miles west, just past the fork where a rutted cart track leads off toward the market town. The road is more than just packed earth. Here, it has been carefully layered, though the care shows signs of wearing thin. A patchwork of cobbles and stones, half submerged in mud, waits for your attention. You join a handful of other men, your workmates, although mates might be too friendly a word. These are fellow laborers, bonded more by hardship than by any deep camaraderie. Each carries a tool or two, a simple iron hammer for breaking large stones, a spade for digging ditches, a flat-headed tamper for pressing crushed stone into the dirt until it holds fast. The foreman stands apart, a stout man with a small ledger tucked under his arm. He marks where each repair begins and ends, scribbling notes you cannot read. You catch his nod, then you and the others start the day's toil. The work begins with clearing. You drag away broken branches that have fallen across the path, their bark slick with last night's drizzle. Your feet sink into the muddy verge. From time to time, you find your boots caked with a thick layer of clay that weighs you down. But you do not bother scraping it off yet. The stone carts arrive, creaking behind a pair of shaggy horses that snort into the cold air. You reach for a large stone, jagged, dull gray, still wet from the quarry. It rests heavily against your shoulder as you carry it to the rutted depression you'll fill. There is a steady, patient rhythm to the work. Dig a shallow bed, lay the largest stones at the base, break down the rough edges with a hammer, then sprinkle smaller gravel to fill the gaps. Above you, crows call from a skeletal tree. You wonder if they remember the shape of this road. Perhaps they watch the endless cycle of stone laid, stone swallowed by mud, stone laid again. The road paver's labor is a constant struggle against the land's tendency to reclaim what has been built. Your thoughts drift as you tamp the stones into place. The tamper is a simple device. A flat wooden board, affixed to a handle, battered smooth from years of use. You lift it and press down, over and over, until the crushed stone and clay beneath your boots feel solid once more. Travelers come and go while you work, moving carefully around you and the scattered piles of stone. A merchant passes, seated atop a jolting cart pulled by oxen. He spares you a glance but says nothing, his mind occupied with the goods he'll sell in the next town. A monk ambles by on foot, his brown robe hitched up to avoid the damp earth. He murmurs a blessing you barely hear. There is no praise for you. No, thanks for keeping the road passable. Your presence is like the stones themselves. Necessary but overlooked. When the road is smooth and dry, you vanish from the minds of those who ride over it. Only when it turns to muck and ruts do they remember your worth. Still, there is quiet comfort in the steady pace, the swing of the hammer, the crunch of stone underfoot, the shared grunts of effort. These things form the music of your day. In the background, birds trill half-heartedly in the head. A thin breeze carries the distant scent of peat smoke from cottages nearby. As the sun rises higher, you pause to sip from a clay flask of ale. Thin, watery, but enough to wash the grit from your throat. You tear off a hunk of bread, chew slowly, and wipe your mouth with the back of your sleeve. You sit for a moment on an overturned cartwheel, letting your eyes drift across the rolling fields. Small wildflowers poke through the roadside grass. For a fleeting second, You almost forget the weight of stone waiting to be laid. When rain comes, the work does not stop. You pull a tattered cloak around your shoulders, but the water trickles down your neck regardless. The earth turns to sludge underfoot, sucking at your boots with each step. Stones that once settled easily now slip and slide, refusing to bind together until the worst of the weather passes. In the winter, frost heaves the roadbed from below, breaking your careful work apart like bread crust cracked in the oven's heat. In the spring, meltwater pools in the depressions, making small lakes that wagons must ford at their own risk. The road paver's job is never finished because nature is never still. There are moments when your mind wanders, even as your body works on. You think of your family, perhaps a wife and a child who wait at home, or perhaps an empty cottage, silent except for the scurrying of mice. You think of your small patch of garden behind the house, the tough stalks of cabbages standing in neat rows. You wonder if the roads you build will still be here when your bones lie beneath them. Somewhere deep inside, there is a sense of pride. Not pride shouted aloud, but the quiet knowledge that without you, the carts would sink axle-deep in mud, the merchants would turn back, the king's messengers would fail to deliver their news. A road paver may not be seen, but his work bears the weight of the realm. By mid-afternoon your shoulders ache and your hands are raw from gripping cold metal and stone. But the section you worked on this morning now lies flat and solid, each stone locked in place like pieces of a puzzle. The path ahead is still long. Tomorrow you will return to patch another stretch, and the day after, yet another. A lifetime spent laying stones, tamping them down, watching them disappear under the feet of countless others. And so, the rhythm continues. A rhythm as steady as your heartbeat, as constant as the passing seasons. Imagine now the gentle hush that settles over the road before dawn breaks. The darkness just beginning to lift, softening into the pale gray of early morning. You stand at the edge of the track, boots sinking into the damp verge as you stare down the length of earth waiting for your touch. The road, like a stubborn old beast, waits to be tended. Ruts and gullies mark where wagons have carved their paths again and again, where rainfall has gnawed at the packed clay, pulling away small stones like teeth loosened in a tired jaw. Today, your task is to widen this narrow passage where it skirts a low hill. In the rainy months, carts slide sideways into the ditch, wheels trapped in sucking mud. Your work will carve away the bank just enough to make a shoulder wide enough for passing, with a thin layer of broken stone to bind the track together. You set down your tools at the crest of the hill, a crude pick, a wooden spade, the ever-present hammer. Around you, the village still sleeps, its thatched roofs, dark silhouettes against the paling sky. But you know that soon enough, the world will stir awake. Cattle driven out to pasture, merchants rattling by with wagons piled high, gossip traded at the well. Your pick bites into the bank first, breaking the hardened clay in thick, damp chunks. The soil here is heavy and dark, mixed with the smell of leaf rot from the small copse of trees to your left. Each swing sends small clods tumbling to your boots. You work steadily, mindful of the rhythm that keeps your muscles from seizing up too soon. Pick, break, shovel, toss, pick, break, shovel, toss. The sound of iron on earth is a steady thud that seems to echo in the back of your mind, a sound you might even hear in your sleep, the labor woven into your dreams. When you pause, you run your fingers through the loose soil. It clings to your skin, rich with moisture, speckled with tiny roots that snake through it, like veins. You think about how the road is a living thing, shifting and sinking with the seasons, demanding your attention long after you've laid down your tools for the day. Sometimes, when your back aches from bending and the sun stands high above, you let yourself wonder what it would be like to work with better tools, to have iron shovels with stronger blades, or wheelbarrows to haul the spoil away. But the thought passes like a cloud on a windy day. You work with what you have because that is all there is. Down the slope, other pavers labor in the shallow gully that runs parallel to the track. They shape drainage, ditches, pulling up reeds and small stones that block the flow of water. A well-cut ditch can make the difference between a firm, dry road and a boggy quagmire that swallows wheels whole. You watch a younger man, no more than 20, hair tied back with a frayed strip of cloth, as he leans into his spade. His movements are quick but sloppy, the blades skimming too shallow to make much difference. The foreman calls to him sharply, pointing to a spot where the bank threatens to give way. No man is born knowing how to fight the road's stubbornness. It is something you learn the same way you learn the pattern of your own heartbeat. Slow, relentless, necessary. As you pause to wipe sweat from your brow, a small group of travelers approaches. 2 men in long, rough spun cloaks, their heads lowered against the wind, leather, donkey laden with sacks. You nod to them, leaning your weight on your pick for a moment's rest. Roads holding up well, one calls out as he his voice is friendly, though he does not slow. You raise a hand in silent reply. Their boots leave shallow prints in the freshly packed earth, marks that will vanish by tomorrow, smoothed over by the passing of wheels, hooves, and the next rain. Behind them, a child skips along, shoes far too big for her feet. She pauses to peer at you, eyes wide. To her you must look like a part of the road itself, dusty, stooped, half hidden by the bank you carve away. You offer her a faint smile, and she darts to catch up with her father. You wonder if she will remember the shape of you, years from now, when she travels this same path again, a woman grown, perhaps guiding her own child, or leading a donkey down the same slope. When the sun reaches its peak, you find a patch of shade beneath a spreading hawthorn. You press your back to its thorny branches, careful not to snag your tunic. You chew on an onion, its sharp tang cutting through the taste of dust in your mouth. There is a kind of peace in these small moments. The rough bark at your back, the soft rustle of leaves above, the scent of the earth newly turned by your own hands. You listen to the distant chatter of your fellow laborers, low laughter, the occasional bark of command, the thump of a spade striking stone. A magpie hops across the road, its feathers a flicker of white and black against the muddy track. It cocks its head, beady eyes, watching for scraps, then flits away when you toss aside the onion's papery skin. You savor the bite of ale from your flask, not strong enough to dull the ache in your shoulders, but enough to wash away the grit between your teeth. Somewhere beyond the hedgerow, a flock of sheep bleats, the sound mingling with the faint, constant breeze that carries the smell of damp grass and earth. When you rise again, you shift your focus to the layered foundation of the road, a secret few travelers ever consider. You know each layer by sight and feel, the larger stones laid like bones at the bottom, the smaller rubble fitted into the spaces between, the sharp gravel spread thin across the top and pounded smooth by your tamper's patient weight. Some roads are older than you can fathom, old Roman tracks that run straight as arrows across the countryside. You sometimes find fragments of their work buried beneath the newest stones, shards of old pottery, smooth as river pebbles, or worn tiles that once paved roads for legions long gone. You wonder what those ancient builders thought of their work, if they, too, felt the same weariness in their bones, the same grudging pride when they stepped back to see a road made passable for another year. The empire that built those roads is dust now, but the roads, in pieces and layers, still remain. Late in the afternoon, you pause to rest your back, leaning on your pick as a rider approaches. Not a farmer or merchant this time, but a man clad in a wool cloak trimmed with fur, clearly someone of rank, though not so high that he spares, noticed. He reins in his horse, the animal's hooves clattering against a patch of stone you laid last week. "You, there," the rider calls. His voice is smooth, unused to shouting. "How long until this stretch is fit for wagons again?" You straighten as much as your spine allows, shifting your weight from one leg to the other. 2 more days' work, if the weather holds. He clicks his tongue. "I'll be passing through with goods bound for market. See that the ditch is clear. Last spring's wash nearly lost me a wheel." You nod once, no argument in you. The rider studies you for a heartbeat longer, a man on horseback looking down at a man of the road. Then he flicks the reins and is gone, the echo of hooves fading into the fields. You turn back to the ditch you've started cutting, the rider's voice lingering in your mind like a stone dropped into a pond, sending out slow, rippling circles. Your work is never truly your own. It belongs to the travelers, to the traders, to the kings, whose roads cross fields they'll never set foot upon. As dusk creeps in, you tamp down the last layer of gravel for the day. The sun sinks low behind the line of hills, throwing long shadows across the track. The foreman's shout signals that the carts must be packed up, tools stowed, spare stones stacked neatly for tomorrow. Your shoulders throb with each step you take away from the site. You glance back once, seeing the faint gleam of stone under the dying light, the ditch line straight, and clear enough that the next rain might pass through without washing all your work into the roadside weeds. Ahead, the village beckons, thin threads of smoke curling up into the evening sky, the promise of warmth behind thick wooden doors. You walk slowly, letting the memory of the day sink into your bones, ready to be carried into the next dawn. Picture the road now, under a sky that shifts from dusty rose to a deep, enveloping blue. Twilight settles across the fields, and the hum of work fades into the hush of approaching night. The last cart of the day creaks along the lane, wheels bumping gently over the fresh stones you tamped down hours ago. You stand at the road's edge, watching the tracks fill with the shadows of dusk. The same ditch you cut this morning now glints with the faint shimmer of water trickling through it. The first test of your day's labor. Satisfied, you plant your hammer in the earth for a moment and rest your hand upon its handle. The other pavers drift toward the village in small knots of conversation, voices softened by distance. Laughter floats back on the breeze, but you linger a moment longer, your gaze tracing the winding path that disappears into the gathering dark. The road is quiet now. No merchants hurrying to market, no riders urging their horses forward, no pilgrims shuffling past with prayers on their lips. It belongs to you for this sliver of time between day and night. When you finally step away, your boots press into the soft verge, the scent of crushed grass rising with each step. The village is close enough that you can see candlelight flickering behind shuttered windows. The road carries you home, the stones you laid last season holding firm beneath your feet. Your cottage stands near the edge of the settlement, a squat, timber-framed dwelling with a garden plot marked by rough stones. Smoke drifts lazily from the small chimney. You duck inside, shoulders brushing the doorframe worn smooth by years of passing heads. Inside, the air is warm, thick with the smell of cabbage stew simmering over the hearth. A few coals glow at the edges of the fire, casting the room in a flickering orange light. A rough table sits in the center, its surface scarred by knives and time. A single bench rests beside it, ready to bear your weight when you collapse onto it, boots still caked with the day's mud. If you have family here, a wife perhaps, or a mother who keeps the fire burning, you greet them with a nod, words few and precious after a day spent speaking more with the earth than with people. If you live alone, the silence is familiar, almost comforting. You've learned that the road speaks enough for two. You settle at the table, dipping your spoon into the pot that hangs over the fire. The stew is thin, more water than meat, but hot enough to thaw the chill from your bones. You chew slowly, letting the warmth seep into your limbs, the aches of the day easing, just for a moment. Sometimes you share these moments with another paver, a neighbor who drops by to trade a few words, or a young lad apprenticing himself to the road, hoping for work steady enough to keep hunger at bay. You speak of small things. The weather, the foreman's mood, the rumor of coin changing hands for a new stretch of track to be laid before winter comes. Outside an owl calls from a hollow tree, its voice low and steady, the same rhythm as your tamper on the stones. The wind pushes against the shutters, but you pay it no mind. You are warm for now, and that is enough. After you've eaten, you turn your attention to your tools. The hammer sits on the table, its wooden handle smooth, where your grip has worn it down over years. The iron head is pitted with small dents, each one a testament to thousands of blows struck against stone. You run a cloth over the metal, wiping away grit and damp. The tamper stands propped against the doorframe, its broad face crusted with clay. You scrape it clean with a small knife, careful not to gouge the wood. Each tool is an extension of your hands. You care for them as you care for the road itself. Without them, the road's hunger would swallow you whole. You pause for a moment, hand resting on the hammer's worn grip, your mind drifting. You wonder if your father held this same tool once, if his father did before him. The road remembers, even when no one else does. If there are voices in the house tonight, family, or a neighbor stopping by, they gather close to the fire, the warmth drawing words from quiet mouths. The conversation flows slowly, like a trickle of water along the ditch you cut that morning. Someone might speak of the fair coming to the next village over, the juggler promised, the chance to see bright ribbons, and hear music that doesn't belong to the wind. A child might ask about the roads that stretch far beyond the village, to the city with its towers, or the cathedral that holds holy relics. You answer as best you can, painting word pictures of places you've never seen but feel connected to by the stones under your boots. Outside, the road waits in darkness, the chill settling into its freshly laid stones. You know that frost may creep in before dawn, testing the fit of each rock, searching for weakness. It always does. When the hour grows late, you bank the fire low. The glow of embers dances across the rough walls of your cottage. You ease down onto your pallet, a sack stuffed with straw, a thin blanket pulled over your shoulders. Sleep comes slowly but steadily. Your mind drifts, carried along the winding track you walked today. Past the old oak, down the slope where your shovel bit into clay, through the ruts you filled with fresh gravel. Sometimes you dream of the road as a great, living creature, a snake made of stone and earth, twisting through the hills, coiling around villages, linking one heartbeat to the next. You dream of travelers passing in endless procession, merchants with bells on their harnesses, monks chanting soft prayers, riders urging horses through the dusk. In these dreams, you are both paver and stone, the hands that lay the path, and the path itself, worn smooth by countless footsteps. Long before the first bird breaks the hush of night, you wake again. The air inside your cottage holds a damp chill. You roll your shoulders, feeling each knot of muscle protest as you pull on your tunic, slip your feet into boots still streaked with dried mud. Outside, the road lies waiting. You step into the cool priddle, the scent of earth and wood smoke clinging to your hair. Somewhere beyond the edge of the village, your tools lean against a fresh stretch of rutted track. Stones waiting to be cracked, mud waiting to be pressed into submission. You breathe in the promise of the day, knowing that the work will outlast you, that the road will remember your touch long after your name has drifted away like dust on the wind. Segment 2, Biography. Event. A Paver S. Path through the Yasamagine, now the boy he once was. Before the bent spine, before the rough hands that feel like stone themselves. Picture a lad of 8 summers, bare feet caked with mud, hair tangled by wind that carries the smell of far-off fields. He stands at the edge of the road, small hands clutching a stick like a scepter. His name might be Wulfric or Edwin, or some other name. The monks might scratch onto a church roll once every few years, when they come through to count souls for the Lord's taxes, but to the road, he is just another pair of feet, running along the verge, chasing birds that scatter into the hedgerow. His father works just ahead, a stooped figure swinging a hammer down onto a jagged rock, splitting it into more manageable pieces. The sound is steady, a heartbeat of iron and stone that fills the boy's ears even as he darts away to pick wildflowers, or peer down into the ditch where rainwater collects. Sometimes his mother calls him back to the edge of the road, handing him a scrap of bread spread thin with lard. She tucks his hair behind his ear with fingers cracked from scrubbing at stains that never fully wash away. Stains of earth, oil, the residue of the road itself. He doesn't yet know the shape of his future. For now, the road is a place to play, a ribbon of possibilities, winding toward a horizon he cannot yet imagine. As the boy grows, the road claims him piece by piece. By 12, he has a small mallet of his own, a stubby thing, more handle than iron. He learns how to strike stone so that it fractures rather than shatters, how to listen for the sound that tells him when a piece will hold or crumble. He learns to read the lay of the land, to see where water will pool and where a ditch must be cut deeper. He learns how to tamp the earth so that it doesn't sink too soon after the first rain. All of this knowledge comes not from books, but from watching the older men, his father, his father's brother, and others who bend their backs under sun and frost alike. His first wages are not coin, but the simple gift of meat stew after a long day, or a small wedge of cheese from a passing merchant who takes pity on the boy's hunger. Sometimes, when a paver has too much ale in him, he'll press a copper penny into the lad's hand, gruffly telling him to mind his mother. At night, he sleeps with the taste of stone dust in his mouth, dreaming of places the road might go, villages he's never seen, towns whose names sound like promises. By his 18th year he stands as tall as any other man in the crew. His shoulders broaden, muscles roped tight from swinging the hammer day after day. His palms bear scars, white lines that cross like rivers on a map. The boy who once ran along the verge now bends his own back to lift stones heavier than himself. He marries in a small chapel a mile from the road he tends. His bride, a miller's daughter, wears a crown of wildflowers and carries a basket of bread and onions, her dowry as modest as his future. They stand together at the altar while the priest mutters blessings in Latin neither of them understands. Outside the chapel door, the road lies waiting. The same road that brought her family flour, that carried the monks who wrote their banns. That'll bear their footsteps back to their small cottage. When their first child comes, a boy with his mother's hair and his father's, he sits the babe on his knee at the roadside while his wife mends a tear in his cloak. The child reaches for a stone, small fingers curling around its rough edges, a tiny echo of the man he may someday become. The years slip by like carts passing under a rain-heavy sky. Each season writes its mark on him, the cracked lips of dry summers, the chill that settles deep in his joints each winter, the damp that clings to his clothes as he works through spring's endless thaw. Sometimes, a stranger stops to speak with him, a traveling friar, a merchant with an eye for stories, a passing soldier boasting of battles far away. They ask about the road, how long it stretches, who tends to its ruts, why the ditch curves here, but not there. He answers with simple truths. The road curves because the earth says so. It dips because a spring runs beneath it. It rises because the king's surveyors once marked it thus, though they never stayed to see it finished. When storms wash away a section, he does not curse the rain. He accepts the work waiting for him when the sky's clear, knowing that the road's hunger is endless, but so too is his resolve. At night, when the hearth crackles low, he tells his children quiet tales of the road's hidden life, of the foxes that make dens beneath the embankment, of the lost coins pressed into mud, of the old bones sometimes unearthed when they dig too deep, relics of travelers who never reached the end of their journey. Once, during the reign of a long-forgotten king, he finds himself called to work on a stretch of track near a noble's manor. The manor rises like a fortress on a low hill, its stone walls pale against the surrounding fields. A retinue of horses and guards lines the roadside, their bright cloaks, a splash of color in the mud and churn. The noble himself, broad-shouldered, voice smooth as polished wood, rides up to where the paver bends, hammer in hand. "You there?" the noble calls. "Is this stretch passable by the morrow?" "We ride at dawn with a train of carts." The paver wipes sweat from his brow, squinting up at the man who looks at him as one might look at a beast of burden. "Aye, my lord," he says, voice quiet, but certain. "If the rain holds and the ditch runs clear." The noble lifts an eyebrow, as if surprised that a man caked in mud can speak with calm certainty. He tosses a silver coin down onto the packed stones. It lands with a dull thud, half buried already in the fresh gravel. "Then see to it," the noble says, spurring his horse away. The paver watches him go, then kneels to dig the coin out. He feels its weight in his palm, heavier than any he's held before. He slips it into a small pouch at his waist, knowing it will buy extra grain for the winter, perhaps a new cloak for his son. Yet the silver, like the road, comes at a cost. More hours in the dark, hammer striking stone by lanterns, flicker fingers stiff and raw as the night grows long. But the road must hold. It always must. Picture him now, years further down his path. His shoulders curve more than they once did. A lifetime bent over stones has made the shape of his back match the gentle bow of the roads he tends. His beard is threaded with gray. His eyes, though weathered, still catch the shift of the earth with the same watchful care they held as a boy. It is late autumn, and the rains have come harder than anyone remembers. A stubborn wind sweeps across the fields, tugging at the thatch roofs of cottages and sending loose branches skittering down the road. At the bend where two tracks meet, a wide patch has sunk into a pool of thick, sucking mud. Wagons sink the ruts deepen into trenches overnight. For days, the paver works to hold the road together. He and 3 others haul cartloads of stone through the downpour, their boots squelching with every step. Water runs down their sleeves, soaking the coarse linen beneath their cloaks. There is no dry place to rest, no dry wood to warm stiff hands. At dusk, they light pitch torches and press on, each man taking turns with a hammer, while the others drag stones into place. The hiss of rain on hot pitch mingles with the steady thud of iron against rock. Their shadows dance along the rutted banks. Shapes, more ghost than man. The villagers watch from their doorways, offering scraps of bread and skins of watered ale to the men who hold their livelihoods together. Without the road, the wagons won't reach the market. Grain will rot in barns. News will stop flowing like blood through the veins of the countryside. The paver knows this without needing to say it aloud. Each stroke of the hammer is a vow that when the storm passes, the road will still hold. When he returns home after long days under the rain, his cottage is heavy with the smell of damp wool drying by the hearth. His wife's hands are rough as she presses a cup of hot broth into his palms. She does not scold him for the mud he trails across the threshold. There is no point. She only kneels to peel off his sodden boots and wraps his feet in dry cloth. Their son, now nearly grown, sits cross-legged by the fire. His shoulders have begun to broaden, his hands to harden. In his eyes flickers a question that doesn't need words. "When will you teach me to claim the road for myself?" The paver answers without speaking, laying out his tools on the table one by one. The hammer, its head pitted but true. The spade, blade thin but sharp from years of shaping ditches. The tamper, its wood darkened by the sweat of decades. He shows his son how to feel for a loose stone under the mud with the sole of a boot, how to angle the hammer just so, splitting rock cleanly rather than scattering shards into the ditch, how to read the slope of the land, the hidden springs that turn dry earth to swamp overnight. These lessons passed not in lectures but in the slow repetition of each day's work. Knowledge passed hand to hand, like a torch that flickers but does not die. One year, during an early spring thaw, the Paver and his son find themselves called to clear a small landslide. Rain and snowmelt have loosened the bank, spilling soil and stone across the track. They arrive at dawn, tools strapped to their shoulders, boots already wet from the sodden fields. As they shovel earth aside, a lone rider approaches, not a lord this time, but a traveling merchant. His horse picks its way carefully along the edge of the slide, hooves sinking into the loose clay. The merchant reins in, watching father and son work. He wears a felt hat pinned up on one side, bright ribbons trailing from its brim, a flash of color against the drab spring landscape. "Good men," he calls out, voice carrying over the scrape of shovel on stone. "How far to the next village?" "The track's near washed away behind me." The Paver straightens, leaning on his spade. He gestures with his chin to the stretch they've just cleared. "Another mile," he says simply. "Keep to the center. Stones will hold." The merchant nods, rummaging in his saddlebag. He tosses a small bundle down. A twist of cloth tied with string. "Or your trouble," he says with a grin. "Good roads make good trade." The bundle lands at the boys' feet. When they unwrap it later, seated on an overturned cartwheel, they find a handful of dried figs, sticky with sweetness, and a scrap of cheese sharp enough to make their eyes water. It is a small gift, but in that moment, it feels as grand as silver. Years pass, marked by the slow addition of lines on the Paver's face, and the steady way his son grows into the shape of him. Together they tend the same stretch, season after season, filling ruts, packing gravel, breaking stones fetched from a quarry that never seems to empty. Sometimes they work beside other crews, men they've known for decades, familiar nods exchanged over the clink of tools. At the edge of a larger village, they help lay a new layer of stone along a market approach, the wide track leading up to the wooden stalls where traders pitch their wares. For once, the Paver pauses to watch the life that pulses along this path. Carts piled high with barrels of ale, baskets of wool, wheels repaired by the wheelwright's sons. Children chase each other along the ditch's edge, feet bare, laughter bright. Each step rests on his work, though no one sees the stones hidden below. A traveling friar stops to bless the road, muttering Latin prayers, and sprinkling a few drops of holy water. The Paver stands off to the side, hammer resting on his shoulder. He feels no need for blessings. The stones will hold because he laid them with his own hands. One evening, they finish late, the sky already a deep wash of indigo. Father and son sit together on the verge, a jug of ale passed between them. Fireflies spark in the grass nearby, tiny flickers of light that seem to echo the stars overhead. They speak of small things. The rumor that the king's army will march this road. Next spring, the fair that will come through after the harvest. The plan to patch the southern bend where carts keep sinking in the soft earth. The son listens, asking questions now and then, but mostly content to hear the road's story told in the steady voice of the man beside him. Each word lays a stone in his own memory, paving the path he will walk when his father's hammer passes to his hands alone. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls, the same low note that marked his father's youth, and now marks his own. The road stretches out before them, a dark ribbon under the moon, a promise that tomorrow there will be work waiting, and the comfort of knowing that work has meaning, however small it seems to the world. Time passes as it always does, like water running through a ditch dug to guide it. New faces appear at the edge of the village, men in brighter cloaks, their horses shod with fresh iron. A new lord has taken the manor on the hill, they say, young, ambitious, eager to bring new trade routes through the fields and forests. For the Paver, these grand plans mean one thing: more road to tend, more stones to lay, more hours bent beneath sun and rain. He greets this news not with complaint, but with the same steady nod that has carried him through every season. The new steward, a stern man with ink stains on his cuffs, comes down to inspect the work. He carries a roll of parchment tucked beneath his arm, eyes always scanning, noting where ditches must be cut deeper, where a bank needs to be shored up. "You there," the steward says one morning, standing over the Paver, as he chips away at a boulder that blocks the path. How soon will this track be passable for the carts? The paver wipes a smear of grit from his brow. Another week, if the quarry carts keep coming. The steward sniffs, as if he might bend the world to his will simply by noting it down on parchment. He scribbles something in the margin, turns on his heel, and leaves the paver to his stones and silent. When the steward's boots have faded into the distance, the paver lifts his hammer again, feeling its familiar weight settle into his palm. The rock cracks beneath the blow, the same way it always has. Indifferent to parchments and the men who carry them. His hair has gone mostly white now, thin and wiry under a battered cap that shields him from the worst of the sun. His steps are slower, each one carefully measured to avoid the sudden wrench of a twisted knee, or the sharp pain that sometimes shoots through his hips. But his eyes are sharp still. They see the places where frost will lift the stones come spring, where the rain will sneak under the packed gravel and make a hollow that will need filling. He knows which part of the bank will give way when the soil grows soft, which trees' roots threaten the path beneath the surface. Beside him works his son, a man full-grown, now taller than his father, shoulders broad as an ox yoke. His swing of the hammer is quick, but he listens when the older man grunts out a word of caution. Not there. Strike the edge. Let the crack run clean. Watch that ditch line. Water'll find its own path if you let it. These words come in low murmurs, half lost under the steady ring of metal on stone. The son nods, adjusts his grip, learns the road's hidden language just as his father once did. Year after year, the cycle repeats itself. Frost and thaw, rain and drought, ruts formed and filled again. Merchants pass in slow caravans, bells jingling from the collars of tired horses. Pilgrims trudge by on blistered feet, offering quiet prayers as they glance at the pavers bent to their labor. Once, a band of soldiers marches past, boots leaving neat, sharp prints that will fade by the next rain. The paver watches them all, hammer paused at his side. He thinks of the road as a river that carries these lives downstream, each traveler, another droplet moving toward a place he will never see. Sometimes, in the hush before dawn, he stands alone at the roadside, staring down the path that vanishes into the low mist. He imagines the distant towns, their high spires catching the first light, their market squares humming with life. The road touches all these places, yet he remains here, anchored to this patch of earth. One late summer, the village hosts a modest festival. Traders arrive with carts draped in bright cloths, their wheels rattling over the stones he and his son laid just weeks before. Tents go up in the field beside the road, striped canopies under which coins change hands, and laughter drifts into the dusk. Children run barefoot down the path, chasing each other between carts laden with barrels of cider and woven baskets of late apples. Music curls through the air, a fiddler's tune, sweet and winding, just loud enough to drown out the hush of the evening wind. The paver stands at the edge of it all, leaning against the shaft of his hammer. He sees the life that the road brings. Not just the work, not just the broken stones and mud, but the gatherings. The trading of goods, the sharing of stories that slipped from mouth to mouth like water through a sieve. His wife joins him, a simple shawl wrapped around her shoulders. They stand together for a while, saying nothing. He feels the roughness of her hand in his, the same hand that pressed bread into the palm of a barefoot boy decades ago. When the festival quiets and the villagers drift home by lantern light, he lingers near the road's edge. The packed stones feel warm under his boots, holding the day's heat. He bends down, presses his palm flat against them, feeling, for a moment, the heartbeat of the road beneath his skin. Not every year is kind. One winter, long after the harvest is gone, and the fields lie frozen under a crust of snow, the paver finds himself caught out in the teeth of a storm. A caravan, caught by an early freeze, has skidded into a ditch where the road curves near the woods. Horses stand with steaming flanks, their eyes wide and rolling, while the merchants stamp their feet and curse the biting wind. The paver and his son haul rough logs to brace the wheels, their boots crunching through the thin ice that crusts the ruts. They work in silence, breath clouding the air, hands going numb, even inside stiff woolen mitts. The road resists, frozen earth refusing to give way, the ditch deep as a grave. Yet slowly, under the steady rhythm of their labor, the caravan moves again. Carts lurch forward, wheels grinding against packed snow. A young driver tosses him a few pennies, muttering a half-formed blessing as he snaps the reins and urges his team ahead. The paver does not bother to watch them disappear into the swirling white. He knows the road will outlast the storm, and that come spring, The frozen ruts will need filling once more. Back in his cottage, he sits by the hearth, boots drying by the fire's edge. His wife ladles out a bowl of thin stew, pressing it into his hands before he can protest. The warmth seeps through the cracked skin of his palms, easing the ache that never fully leaves him now. His son sits across the table, wiping the snowmelt from his boots with a rag. They trade few words, a nod, a grunt of satisfaction at the memory of the carts freed from the ditch. Their eyes meet, sharing an unspoken promise that the road's weight is theirs to carry, as it always has been. Outside, the wind moans across the eaves, rattling the shutters. But within these walls, there is a simple comfort, the knowledge that, while the world changes, the road remains, its endless line, threading through fields and forests, villages and manors, binding them all together. And so he lets his eyes close for a while, the steady crackle of the fire blending with the faint memory of the hammer's ring, a lullaby for a paver who has given his life to a path that will carry on long after he is gone. Imagine him now, older than any of the stones he once hefted onto his shoulders, with barely a grunt of effort. His hammer rests more often against the wall these days, its handle worn smooth, where his fingers carved their memory into the grain. He sits on a low bench just outside his cottage door, looking down the road that has claimed more of him than any house or hearth ever could. He watches the world drift by. A pair of boys run barefoot along the verge, sticks held aloft like wooden swords, their laughter ringing clear in the morning air. A milkmaid trudges behind them, balancing pails that slosh with each careful step. Farther down, a cart rattles along, the wheels jolting over stones that he himself once set. Years ago, when his back was strong enough to stand the day's weight without complaint. He closes his eyes for a moment, listening to the faint chorus of life moving along this path. The creak of wooden wheels, the rhythmic plod of hooves, the soft murmur of voices carried on the breeze. It comforts him, this constant hum-proof that his work still holds, piece by piece, stone by stone. His son works the road now, and his son, Essen, a lad, no older than the barefoot boy he once was, already walks behind, learning to read the earth's secrets. He sees them sometimes from his place on the bench, the steady swing of the hammer, the familiar bend of the shoulders, the gestures that once lived in his own hands, now alive in theirs. Sometimes the boy comes running up the lane, cheeks flushed from the cold wind, hair sticking up like straw. He'll drop onto the bench beside his grandfather, words tumbling out about a stone that cracked just right, about a patch of clay that sucked the boots straight off his feet, about a traveling bard who passed by with tales of a city paved in gold. The old man smiles, slow and soft, letting the boy's chatter wash over him like rain over the packed earth. He does not tell him there is no city without mud, no golden road that holds back the seasons forever. That truth will come in its own time, carried in the swing of the hammer and the ache in the shoulders when the frost bites deep. One dusk, when the air is thick with the scent of early summer blossoms, he asks his son to walk with him. They follow the road out beyond the village, past the oak that still stands stubborn against wind and frost, its roots pushing up stones he once stamped flat. They walk slowly, the old man leaning on a sturdy stick that his grandson carved for him, a branch of ashwood, polished to a soft sheen. Each step feels like a memory pressed into the earth. Here a stretch that washed away one spring and took a full fortnight to mend. There, a bend that always threatened to swallow wheels whole, until he found the right stones to bind the mud. His son listens, saying little, but he understands. Each tale is not just a story, it's a lesson, a reminder that the road has its own will, that no matter how many stones you lay, the earth will rise up to test your work, season after season. When they reach the crest of a low hill, they pause to catch their breath. From here, the road unwinds below them, like a ribbon cast across the fields, fading into the dusk. It is not a grand thing, not a royal causeway lined with statues and torchlight, but it is steady, useful, a line that stitches village to village, farm to market, soul to soul. The old man lays a hand on his son's arm. It holds, he says simply, voice rough as gravel. That's enough. In the final years, he ventures out less often, but when he does, he stands at the edge of the work, shoulders wrapped in a thick cloak against the morning chill, eyes narrowing as he watches the younger men set the stones. He calls out now and then, his voice carrying that quiet authority that the road itself seems to respect. Mind that slope, you'll have a hollow by winter. Or, those stones won't bind, right? Swap them out. No one argues, even the new foreman, A man half his age with a purse of coin tucked under his belt nods without protest. They all know that the old man's eyes see what they cannot yet. The secret lean of the land, the places where water waits to claim the road for its own. And when the work is done for the day, they help him down the verge, steadying him when his legs tremble under his own weight. He nods his thanks, though he would rather stand alone and feel the stones beneath his feet, just for a moment more. In the final stretch of his life, he dreams more often than he sleeps. He dreams of the road at dawn, mist curling over the ditches, the fresh frost sparkling on the packed stones, like the scales of some great serpent. He dreams of his father's hands guiding his own, the swing of the hammer, the scrape of the shovel, the tamp that presses the world into place. He dreams of travelers, endless lines of them, their shapes blurred by time, merchants with jingling harnesses, pilgrims humming prayers under their breath, children staring wide-eyed at the path that vanishes into the horizon. He is all of them at once, and none of them carried forward on the back of a road that never ends. Sometimes he wakes before dawn, shivering under his blanket, and whispers to the darkness. It holds a promise to himself, a promise to the stones that lie hidden beneath the mud and the cart tracks. One quiet morning, the old man does not rise from his bed. The hearth's embers burn low, casting long shadows on the walls of the cottage. Outside, the road waits, silent and patient, its stones frosted with the first chill of autumn. His family gathers close. His son places the hammer, the same one passed from father to son for as long as any remember. Beside his still hands, it rests there, a symbol not of work left undone, but of labor fulfilled, a life given to the binding of places, the bridging of lives. When they carry him from the cottage, they follow the path he helped build. His footsteps lie, pressed into it, unseen but felt, the shape of a man who gave himself to the earth and the stones, so that others might pass more as years will pass, rains will come and wash away the top layer of gravel. Frost will lift stones from their beds. New pavers will bend their backs, filling ruts he once filled, cutting ditches where the bank sags again. The boy who ran barefoot will become the man with the hammer. His swing will echo the rhythm of his grandfather's, each strike a heartbeat, a promise that the road still binds the land together. Travelers will pass, carts laden with grain, riders bearing messages of kings and lords. None will know the old man's name, but in the hush of dawn, when the mist lies thick on the verge, and the stones hold firm under the wheels, a whisper of him remains. In this way, the road remembers, quietly, patiently, one stone at a time. Segment 3, Mystery, Archaeology. For a moment that you could peel back the layers of the road you've walked so many times in your mind tonight. Not just the rough gravel tamped firm by the paver's calloused hands, nor the base stones locked in place to fight the rutting of passing carts, but deeper still, where time settles like dust in forgotten corners. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a shallow trench freshly cut into the roadside. The soil is a tapestry of color. Pale clay here, darker veins, where old watercourses once trickled through, pockets of sand, like hidden rivers, turned to stone. A small, broken shard of pottery pokes through the earth, its edges dulled by centuries of quiet burial. It is not unusual for the road to offer up such relics. Dig deep enough, and the ground remembers all who passed this way. Travelers long gone, settlements that rose and fell, campfires that smoldered and then sank into the soft earth to be swallowed by moss and mud. Sometimes a paver, working his ditch in the hush before dawn, might feel the clang of his spade against something that does not belong to the mud. A tile, smooth and curved, a piece of iron half rusted into nothing, a coin stamped with the face of a king whose name has long been lost to village tongues. In these moments, the road feels more than just stone and toil. It becomes a thin skin stretched across generations, a place where the past presses close, whispering secrets through the ruts and ditches. Long before the paver bent his back over this winding track, others walked here. The Roman legions, boots wrapped in leather thongs, helmets catching the sun as they marched mile upon mile. Their engineers laid the bones of roads that cut through forest and bog alike, straight as an arrow, impervious to the shifting moods of the land, or so they thought. Time wore even those mighty roads down, stones lifted by frost, rain breaking the mortar to rubble, tree roots splitting the once proud paving like an old scar reopening. When the paver's spade cuts through the earth, sometimes it catches the glint of those older stones, smooth slabs laid by hands, long turned to dust. He knows, without any scribe to tell him, that these relics run like hidden rivers beneath his own work. A patch of road that holds firm through the worst winter often rests on the skeleton of a Roman track, its foundation deeper than any peasant could lay alone. No inscription marks these layers, no grand monument points the way, but they remain stitched into the soil like the bones of an ancestor cradling the road above. Not every fragment unearthed by the spade or the ditcherous blade is a coin or a broken tile. Some finds speak of small lives, of hope tucked away beneath the earth, never meant to be found. In some villages, the old ones whisper of coins pressed into fresh stone beds as offerings to ensure the road holds fast. A single penny, gleaming against the packed clay, given up in exchange for safe passage and the hope that the road's hunger would be stilled for another season. Other times, they speak of charms, buried at the crossroads, a bent iron nail, a scrap of bone, a tiny figure carved from wood, and hidden where three paths meet. These tokens, left by unseen hands, call for luck, or protection, or simply an edge over the shifting whims of weather and time. The paver swinging his hammer might never know he stands above such secret offerings. But once in a while, the earth reveals its secrets. A coin, green with age, turned up by the edge of a spade. A small, round bead, dull yet somehow bright against the dark soil. For a breath, the work pauses. He turns the thing over in his hand, feels its smoothness, wonders who placed it here, and why. Then he lets it slip into the pocket of his tunic or leaves it at the roadside, where the rain may carry it deeper still. Every stone underfoot carries more than just the weight of the wheel above it. It holds the weight of stories, whispered at campsites, traded over a shared jug of ale, spun by traveling minstrels who follow the road as faithfully as any lord's messenger. There is the tale of the merchant who lost his fortune on a road like this. A chest of coins spilled from a broken cartwheel and vanished into the ditch. They say, on moonless nights, the ghost of that merchant still walks the verge, fingers brushing the mud in search of the silver he never found. There is the story of the thief who buried his loot beside an ancient milestone, thinking to return once the hue and cry had died down. He never did. And the treasure, if it ever existed, lies still beneath the roots of an oak that splits the verge like a claw. And there are quieter stories, too, of lovers who met at the bend in the track, away from watchful eyes. Of pilgrims who left behind a scrap of cloth or a lock of hair tied to a roadside cross, hoping it might guide their steps or protect them from illness on the journey ahead. The road listens. It gathers these tales like pebbles washed downstream, burying them just deep enough that they might rise again when a spade bites through the earth or a ditch floods, and the past is laid bare once more. In some corners of the countryside, folks still speak of the old Paver's secret. The belief that those who tend the roads come to know more than they let on, that the rhythm of the work, the steady strike of hammer on stone, tamps the lands, stories down into the paver's bones. They say an old paver might sense when a storm will come long, before the first black clouds roll across the fields, that he might feel a hollow beneath the earth, the ghost of an old culver, a buried shrine, a grave left unmarked when the world moved on. He knows which stretch will flood, which stones will slip, which patch of verge hides something best, left undisturbed. The paver himself would smile at such talk, shifting his hammer from one shoulder to the other. He would say he knows nothing but the stones, how they crack, how they settle, how they hold. Yet in the hush before dawn, when the mist curls low over the ditch, he feels the hum of something older beneath his feet. Not a voice exactly, but a murmur. A reminder that the road is never just the road. Imagine now the ditch, that shallow channel carved at the road's edge, so humble in its purpose, yet holding more history than any legend. Every paver knows the ditch is not just for water to drain away. It is a place where the world's cast-offs gather. Fragments of clay pipes, the iron ring from a broken harness, the heel of a shoe lost in the churn of mud. The ditch is an accidental archive. No scribe sets pen to parchment here. Instead, the water does the writing, burying each piece in silt until a spade or the passing of years brings it to light again. Long after the rainwater has run its course, the ditch tells stories to the patient eyes that care to look. A worn token stamped with a saint's face, pressed into the mud by a pilgrim's trembling hand. A buckle, green with age, dropped by a soldier hurrying down the track with news of some skirmish now forgotten by all but the stones. The road paver, tamping down the verge, might pause at the glint of metal or the pale curve of bone revealed in the bank as soft crumble. He will lift it, turn it over in his palm, and place it in the hollow of a pocket, a silent nod to the unseen trail that runs beneath the path he tends. Crossroads, where one track meets another, are places where stories deepen, where superstition curls like mist around the stones. Villagers mutter that spirits linger here, drawn to the crossing of paths like moths to a lantern's glow. When a paver works near such a place, he may find more than stones to shape. Strange objects might rest just below the surface. A pottery jar sealed with wax, hidden where two ruts converge. A silver pin stabbed into the earth as if to stitch it shut. Old wives say these are charms, tokens meant to bind misfortune, or to summon a twist of fate for the one who knows how to bury such secrets. A lock of hair, a scrap of parchment marked with a sign no priest would bless. Offerings to the restless dead, or two things older than the church bells that now mark the passing hours. To the paver, these finds are handled with quiet respect. He does not mock them, nor does he speak of them loudly at the ale. Instead, he sets them aside on a stone or under a hedgerow, allowing the road to decide whether they remain hidden or rise to the light once more. Sometimes the ditch yields bones. Not always the smooth, white relics of cattle or sheep, but the long, narrow shapes that speak of other stories entirely. A fragment of a jaw, a line of finger bones, curled as though in sleep. No one is surprised to find the dead near the road. In troubled times, a famine, a pestilence, travelers fell where they walked. Some buried their kin in shallow graves at the verge, marked with a crude cross of bound twigs. Others simply vanished beneath the earth, carried away by rain and time. When the paver's spade turns up such a remnant, he pauses. He lifts his cap and mutters a prayer, simple words given freely to the memory of the stranger. Then the bones are set aside gently, pressed deeper under fresh soil, or laid within the roots of an old tree that drinks from forgotten sorrows. The road, in its quiet way, keeps these souls company, a constant hum of footsteps, and wheels passing above, a chorus that tells the lost they have not been entirely left behind. There are stretches of road where the earth speaks of layers so old that even the paver's grandfather never knew their names. A wagon might jolt over a sunken patch in the track, and when the pavers dig down to mend it, they find the ghost of an older path. Stones blackened by fire or timber planks so rotted they crumble at a breath. In some places, the road runs atop a sunken causeway built when the marshes still ruled the land. Great tree trunks were laid side by side, hewn by stone axes or crude iron blades, their ends buried under peat. These planks, dark and waterlogged, have held up the world's footsteps longer than any king's decree. No signposts mark these ancient ways, no charter records who built them. They simply lie there, deep beneath the packed gravel, a reminder that every new road is but a thin skin stretched across the bones of the old. Sometimes a paver, kneeling beside the open trench, will rest his hand on these hidden timbers. He feels their damp chill, the pulse of centuries locked within each ring of wood. And for a heartbeat, he is connected to all those who passed this way before him. Barefoot farmers with flint sickles, merchants leading shaggy oxen, soldiers trudging toward battle they did not yet know they would lose. A mile marker half buried at the verge lends askew. Its carving is faint, the chisel lines softened by rain and the scraping of cartwheels brushing too close in the dark. The paver knows this stone well. He has watched it lean further each winter, its base sinking into the verge like a dozing old man. Once, the marker told travelers how far to the next town, a word now half swallowed by moss. Those who pass barely glance at it, though it once offered guidance to pilgrims who clutched their satchels tight and squinted at the script in the failing light. At times a curious soul tries to brush the stone clean, tracing a fingertip across the weathered letters, but the meaning slips through like water through cracks in old moss. Only the road paver truly remembers how such a stone stood tall once, freshly carved, its purpose clear as the sound of the hammer that struck it. To him, the marker is not just a relic. It is a reminder that words fade while the road holds, that travelers come and go, their names turn to whispers, lost in the rustle of hedgerows, yet the stones, pressed deep into the earth, remain. On nights when the road lies empty, when no lantern glows at the bend, when the wind hushes its gossip among the willows, the paver might stand at the edge of the track and feel how much the road keeps for itself. There are no songs for the paver's labor, no parchment listing every hidden coin, every broken buckle, every bone that rests beneath the stones. But in the hush, the road hums with all of it. A chorus made not of words, but of silence, carrying memory. It is a gentle thing, this hum. It reminds the paver that he, too, will one day become part of the layer below. A name left off the roll, but a life pressed into the foundation all the same. Imagine walking along the road just as dusk settles its gentle weight across the fields. The air is cool against your cheeks, and a hush clings to the hedgerows. Up ahead, at the place where two tracks meet, you glimpse a small, weathered cross tucked into the grass beside the verge. These roadside shrines are humble things. A rough plank nailed to an old post, a stone carved with a simple cross, sometimes crowned with a tangle of flowers left to wither in the breeze. No one tends them in any formal sense, but somehow they persist, propped upright when the wind blows too hard, adorned with scraps of cloth tied by travelers in search of mercy, protection, or safe passage. The paver sees these crosses more often than most. He works the land where the living and the dead brush sleeves in passing. He knows that the shrines stand watch for lost souls, those who died on the road, struck down by thieves, famine, or fever while miles from hearth and kin. At dawn, when the ditch must be cut deeper and fresh gravel laid to hold the spring rain at bay, he might pause beside one such marker. He lifts his cap, murmurs a blessing under his breath. Not because a priest told him to, but because the road itself seems to ask it of him. In some places, a few coins or tokens gather at the base of these shrines. Pilgrims bound for far-off cathedrals will tuck a copper penny between stones, or wedge it beneath the post's leaning base. A lock of hair, a scrap of ribbon, sometimes even a smooth river stone marked with a sign scratched by a pin. Each a small bargain with fate. These tokens speak of hope and worry, left behind by those who fear what the road might hold. Brigands lurking in the woods, storms gathering on the horizon, unseen sickness waiting at the next village. The paver never pockets these coins. He understands that their worth is not measured in weight or mint, but in the prayer that lingers on each one. He lets the rain wash them into the verge, lets the ditch carry them away, if that is what the earth demands. Some he buries deeper with the fresh-tamped stones. An old habit, half practical, half reverent, stitching the living road to the quiet wish for safe passage. Not all markers at the roadside speak only of the sacred. Scattered across the kingdom, small standing stones serve as silent ledgers, places where passing merchants once laid their tithes in kind. A traveling wool trader might pause beside one, lowering a sack of fleece to the ground with a grunt. A farmer, driving a donkey laden with onions or barley, might leave a handful at the base. These goods, watched over by no one but the crows perched on the stone's flat top, served as offerings to the manor or the local church, a token of trade, trust, and obligation. In time, these tithe stones fell from use. The lords built weighing houses nearer the villagers. Taxes found their way into tallied books rather than cloth sacks left in the dust. Yet the stones remain, leaning crookedly at the roadside, half sunk into the grass. Sometimes the paver, cutting a new ditch, finds a tithe stone buried deeper than any living soul remembers. He lifts it carefully with the pry of his spade, setting it upright again if he can. It means little now, yet he respects the memory, a sign that the road was once not just a path, but an unspoken contract between those who walk it and those who claim it. The old ones say that sometimes the road itself becomes a resting place, but not always for bodies. In villages clinging to the old ways, it is whispered that, when a newborn comes too soon or too frail to breathe a full life, a mother might bury a lock of the child's hair near the verge. A thin scrap of cloth, a sliver of bone, from a tiny finger, hidden beneath the tamped clay, not marked for the priest's prayers, but held in the road as secret keeping, where the constant passing of feet and hooves might carry the little one as soul onward, never truly alone. These stories drift like fog through the pavers, campfires at the end of a long day. An old man might tell of finding a linen scrap that trembled in the breeze like a ghostess, or of a hollow in the clay that felt softer than it should have been. No one mocks these tales. Each man simply lets the hush settle back in, the crackle of the fire filling the silence. The road is an honest thing, yet it holds more than honest sweat. It cradles the private fears and griefs that no church wall has ever held so close. Sometimes, the road yields things that no one can explain. A smooth disc of stone, carved with symbols that mean nothing to the paver yet feel old in a way that makes the hair rise at the nape of his neck. A small bronze bell that rings clear and sweet. though its clapper is rusted nearly through. A single bead, deep green glass, unlike any the village weaver has ever seen. What are these? Lost trinkets, dropped by traders from far lands. Charms from old, hidden faiths that sank beneath the tide of newer prayers. Or simply the earth's strange way of reminding the living that the past is never as settled as they like to believe. The paver's fingers trace these shapes, his thumb brushing the edge of the stone or the delicate crack in the bell. He knows enough not to claim them as his own. Sometimes he presses them deeper into the bank, the weight of fresh earth sealing the mystery once more. In the long hours of tamping and digging, the paver learns to read the road in ways that no scribe can teach. A patch of gravel that stays dry long after the rain has stopped elsewhere. A low stretch that hums with the weight of water even in the dry months. A hollow beneath the verge where the sound of the tamperer's strike shifts from solid to hollow, telling him that the earth there still hides a secret pocket. This knowledge is never written down. It lives in the bend of a knee, the tilt of a shoulder, the moment when the hammer lifts and falls at just the right angle to split a stone, instead of scattering it uselessly into the ditch. Ask him what he knows, and he will shrug. But watch him stand at a crossroads at dawn, boots planted in the mud, eyes drifting down the path that vanishes into the morning mist. You will see it then. The quiet pact between man and road, the hush of hidden things buried just deep enough to keep the world turning. Picture the paver himself, now part of the road's quiet folklore. Long after his hammer hangs on a cottage wall and his boots rest by the hearth, the villagers speak of him in low voices, half smiling as they do. They say he knew where the road was hollow, where the earth's secrets pressed up against his boot. They say he found bones and coins and charms in the ditch and gave them back to the land without question. Some children claim he still walks the verge on misty nights, leaning on his stick, checking that the stones hold. Such tales do not frighten the villagers, they comfort them, really. A reminder that the road has a guardian still, even if no living soul can see him. When wheels grind through a fresh patch of gravel without sinking, when the spring floods drain off without stealing the verge, someone might tap the marker stone with a knuckle and murmur, "Good work, old paver." They do not speak his name. Few remember it now, but the hush that drifts along the hedgerows keeps the shape of him. A man bent at the shoulder, hammer swinging in patient arc's eyes, scanning the ruts that tomorrow's travelers will never notice. Every so often a new shrine appears, a cross, its wood bright and raw, lashed together with twine or a strip of torn cloth. No one speaks of who places it there, but everyone knows it means someone was lost on that patch. A cart that overturned on a bank, a rider thrown when his horse stumbled in a rut too deep to see by lantern light. The paver's descendants, or those who carry his hammer now, pause at these shrines as they tend the stretch nearby. A stone might be nudged back into line, the ditch cleared more carefully so rain does not pool where the accident lay. If a coin or token appears at the shrine's base, they leave it untouched. A soft treaty between the living and whatever lingers in the night mists. For the paver's line, the road is never just a job. It is a thin, shifting line between this world and the hush beneath it. A place where small prayers, offered without fanfare, settle into the clay like seeds waiting for the spring. Children walking barefoot to market often pause at strange shapes in the verge. A chunk of flint too smooth for the field. A piece of rusted iron that looks almost like a blade, a splinter of bone so old it crumbles at a breath. They pocket these treasures sometimes, carrying them to grandmothers who purse their lips and mutter that the road remembers more than it should. An old woman might tie a scrap of red cloth around a child-esque wrist before he sets out down a lonely stretch, not to guard against wolves or men with knives, but to trick the spirits at the crossroads, who like to tangle feet and turn travelers in circles. The cloth is bright enough to catch the eye of things that hunt at the edges of belief, and humble enough that they lose interest once they have stolen its luck. The paver's family knows these tales too. His son's son might laugh at them while bending to mend a frost-heaved patch, but when dusk falls, he ties his own bit of cloth to the handle of the tamper, just in case. Some stories stick, whether you say you believe them or not. Every village has its rumor of a hidden grave beneath a road. Some say a murdered stranger. Some whisper an outlaw buried where the king's law might trample him forever. Others claim a local wise woman once chose to be laid to rest in the clay just beneath the ruts, her bones pressed under the tamped gravel so her sight might stretch along every mile her people traveled. No record proves these tales, no cross marks the spot, but when the paver's spade strikes, something that sounds different, a hollow thud, softer than rock, he lifts his cap and shifts the dirt with care. If he finds nothing more than roots, he laughs, wiping his hands on his breeches. But sometimes he presses the soil back in place, refusing to see what he knows is best, left to the road's embrace. To the paver, this is no burden. It is part of the pact. The road gives its living, food, coin, trade, gossip, and news. In return, it keeps the dead who never made it home, their stories tucked beneath the stones so that travelers need not bear their weight. On certain nights, when the harvest moon sits low and heavy in the sky, the road seems to breathe. A hush falls over the verge, and a soft mist creeps along the ditches, curling around milestones and old crosses. The wind pauses, as if to listen for footsteps, the paver's descendants sometimes feel it, a weight in the chest, an echo in the soles of their boots when they walk the stretch alone. Some say it is just the damp air rising from the earth, the warmth of the day slipping back into the clay. But to those who spend their lives tending these tracks, it feels like a reminder. The road holds everything: your sweat, your breath, your stories, and your bones. When the last cart has rattled by, the monks in their scriptoria never bothered to note the names of the men who kept the roads passable. They write of kings and abbots, of cathedral stones rising into the heavens, of battles won and lost on fields far from this quiet path. They do not write of the ditch that carried the spring flood safely into the next meadow, or the cross set at the bend where a child slipped under the wheels of an ox cart. But the road itself records it all. A shallow hollow where wheels always find the same line, a buried shard of pottery, once part of a pilgrim's journey, a scrap of copper beaten into the clay by hooves and years. For the paver, this hidden ledger is enough. He never dreamed of statues or scribes. He knew that his mark would not be carved in stone above the ground, but pressed deep into the earth below it. In time, travelers will speak of new roads, paved smoother, wider, more forgiving to cart wheels and riders' bones. Engineers will measure every dip and slope, ordering the stones to lie obediently in lines that defy the land's old hums and hollows. Yet even these new roads will rest on the backs of the old ones. The ancient timber causeways buried in peat, the Roman slabs long since shattered and scattered into the local quarries, the medieval ruts still tracing their quiet scars across the fields. When a new crew cuts a ditch for fresh drainage, the spade might strike a layer of the paver's work, his stones tamped firm by hand under rain and sun, the imprint of a boot still faintly pressed into the clay that held for a season or two, or maybe a century. Segment 4. Social, elite, contrasting daily life. The road through other ice. Road as seen from the back of a well-fed horse. Its coat brushed sleek by a stable boy, its tack polished bright enough to catch the sun. The rider sits tall, a cloak gathered at the shoulders, boots free of mud that clings to the verge. To him, the road is not a daily battle of hammer and frost. It is freedom, a line drawn between his manor-s warm hearth and the distant town-s bustling market square. He feels the road's ruts only as a faint jolt in the saddle, nothing more than a passing nuisance. His mind wanders to the fine wines waiting to be sampled at the next hall, or the soft linen he will bargain for, to please a wife whose hands never touched the rough timber of a paver's spade. He does not think of the stones beneath the hooves, nor the sweat pressed into the clay by a man he will never name. Yet in his own way, the road binds him too. Without it, his letters do not travel. His coin does not trade. His wealth, measured in wool and grain and rights over this patch of earth, cannot stretch beyond the fields his father staked out long before. He knows this, faintly, so when he passes a crew of pavers bent over a ditch, he might raise a hand in distant greeting. He does not dismount, but the gesture is enough, an acknowledgement that these rough men are the spine that holds his comfort aloft. Behind the noble comes the merchant. His cart is heavy with bolts of cloth wrapped in waxed linen, casks of salted fish, baskets of dried herbs from a monastery garden 3 villages away. His oxen plod slow and steady, their broad hooves pressing deep into the fresh gravel that a paver set just days before. The merchant's eyes flick constantly to the sky, counting the hours until dusk, measuring whether the next mile will bring a sudden storm or a clear stretch that buys him another village estrade before nightfall. To him, the road is more than a path, it is coin in motion. Each smooth stretch is money spared in repairs when the wheel does not crack on a hidden stone. Each firm bank means fewer days lost, 2 wagons mired in a rut, turned to soup by spring rains. Sometimes, he tosses a crumb of thanks to the men he sees along the way, a heel of bread, a sip of cider from a stoppered jug, a copper penny pressed into a rough palm, He knows he will pass this way again, and he wants the stones to hold. He does not ask the paver's name. He does not need to. The stones speak for him, bearing the weight of his fortune just as surely as the oxen strain against their yoke. Picture a lady on her palfrey, a gentle horse bred not for labor, but for the comfort of a smooth gait. She travels not alone, but with an escort. A few watchful men, their eyes scanning the trees for outlaws emboldened by tailies of easy coin. The road is dry today. Dust rises in small puffs as her horse picks its way between ruts shallower than they were last winter. She does not feel the stones that lie just beneath the soft soil. She is more concerned with the way the wind pulls her veil aside, or how the sun warms her gloved hands through the fine weave of her sleeves. She knows of roads only in passing, as ribbons that lead to her cousin's wedding to the abbey, where her father's soul has prayed for each feast day to the market square, where she once bought a bolt of green cloth that still smells faintly of the dyer's vats. If you asked her how the road is made, she would smile politely and say, by men with spades, as if that were all there was to it. She does not think of the ditch that carries the rain away from her horse's hooves, or the gravel that keeps the cart's wheel from sinking when her luggage follows behind. But when she returns to her hall and unlaces her dusty riding boots, she whispers a quick prayer of thanks, not to the paver, but to the saint whose small shrine stood at the crossroads. The paver's work lingers, unblessed, beneath the footprints her palfrey left behind. Then there are the pilgrims, more humble than nobles, more numerous than merchants, poorer than all, but the paver himself. They gather at the edge of the road at dawn, bundles tied tight, bread and onions stuffed into cloth sacks, wooden staffs clutched like a promise. For them, the road is a penance and a hope. Each step pounds prayers into the clay, each mile a bead on a rosary made not of carved wood, but of blistered feet and prayers muttered at shrines, nailed to rotting fence posts. They bless the road when it is dry. They curse it when the rain pulls in wheel ruts that suck their boots down to the ankles. They lean heavily on the mile markers, pressing foreheads to the cool stone, trusting that the path will hold just long enough to bring them to the cathedral that glimmers in their mind, eye like a lantern on the far horizon. And when they pass the pavers bent over their tampers, they cross themselves quickly, not because they fear the men, but because they sense that here, in the hush of hammer and gravel, lies a work too old and constant to name. The paver, for his part, watches them pass with the faintest of nods, his hands already busy with the next stone. Sometimes the road quivers under the sudden thunder of hooves. A royal messenger, cloak streaming behind him, like a banner of urgency, rides low over the saddle, one hand clutching a sealed parchment that might change the fate of a village, a noble house, even a kingdom. For him, the road is life or death, not the shallow struggle of a ditch flooding, but the raw, cold reality that speed must trump all else. His eyes flick to every rut and hollow. He curses aloud when the hooves stumble on a patch of loose gravel. He thanks the paver under his breath when a stretch holds firm, carrying him and his message safely across the miles. He never sees the men who laid that firm stretch. They have long since gone home to their stew pots and sleeping children. But the paver's hammer rides with him all the same, hidden in every stone that does not slip away beneath the gallop. And so they pass, noble and merchant, pilgrim and messenger, all bound by the same thread that the paver knots together with every swing of his arm. They share the road, yet they live in worlds that rarely touch. The lord in his hall will never taste the dust that cakes a paver's throat at noon. The merchant in his counting house will never feel the frozen ditch water seeping through torn boots. The pilgrim who weeps at the shrine's base may never know that the solid ground beneath his knees once crumbled until a rough hand tamped it down again. The paver knows them all by the ruts they leave behind, the coins they drop at the verge, the marks of their passage pressed into the road's skin like small, fading scars. He expects no praise. He asks no blessing. He simply watches as the world passes overhead, each footstep adding another story to the hush beneath the stones. Picture a hole on a chill winter's night, beams blackened by centuries of smoke, a hearth wide enough for 3 men to stand inside if they wished. Rushes covered the stone floor, scattered with dried herbs to chase away the staleness of too many boots trudging mud inside. Trestled tables sag under trenchers of bread, wedges of hard cheese, and dripping joints of meat. The lord sits at the high table, a cup of spiced wine warming his palm. Around him gather stewards, bailiffs, a few trusted men-at-arms, all sharing tailies, of flocks counted, taxes owed, timber to be felled. Somewhere near the hearth, 2 minstrels trade soft tunes that flicker in and out of the low murmur of voices. A serving girl slips between benches, refilling cups and fetching more firewood from the stack by the door. Her feet leave small prints in the rushes, damp from the patch of melting snow just beyond the threshold. She thinks of the road that brought the salt for the stew, the wine from the distant vineyards, the traveling cloth merchant whose bolts now drape the lordess wife in colors the village weaver could never match. To her, the road is distant but near all at once. A thing that brushes her life each time the kitchen door bangs open with a cart from the next estate or a messenger thuds through, stamping his boots on the stone. She will never ride its length in comfort. She knows its taste only in the mud that clings to her hem when she cuts through the track to fetch water before dawn. Above her, the steward speaks of taxes for the roads, coins collected to hire men to keep the mud at bay, though those men's names rarely make it into the ledgers. He means the pavers, though he never says the word. To him, the road is an entry in a column, tolls and rights of way, a worry if bandits appear, a line on parchment to be balanced by coin. The next morning, when the first light lifts the rim of the sky into pale silver, a line of carts creaks down that same road, toward the market square. From the high manor window, the lord's son leans on the sill, yawning into the cold. He watches the line like a boy might watch ants tracing a path over the garden wall. Below, the road pavers work holds under the fresh frost, the ruts shallow enough to let the wheels turn without jerking the mules to a halt. The boy does not think of them. He thinks instead of the wool that will be sold, the barrels of cider that will return, the handful of coins that might find their way into his pocket for a new dagger from the traveling smith. At the back of the last cart, a paver's son trudges in its wake, boots caked in clay, shoulders hunched against the wind. He is bound for the same market, though he will trade not wool or fine cloth, but the calluses of his hands for a few coins mending a wheel, or lifting sacks for the cloth merchantess lad. They will stand on the same cobbled square, inches apart, yet each carries the road in his bones differently. In spring, when the blossoms edge the hedgerows with pale stars, the lord and his guests ride out to hunt. They thunder down the track, hounds snapping at their stirrups, laughter lost in the echo of hooves. The fresh stretch of road they cross was laid only weeks ago, gravel tamped firm by the paver and his crew through long days of thaw and freezing nights that made their knuckles ache like stone. The noblemen ride so fast they barely notice the ruts that do not catch a hoof. The ditch that drains away last night, Rainso the verge, does not suck the horse's legs down to the knee. At the bend near the old milestone, they swing off onto the deer path that cuts through the young oak copse. They vanish into the hush of the woods, leaving behind only the churn of hoofprints, a spray of fresh mud across the stones, and a single copper coin dropped from a saddlebag, lost at a ditch found maybe one day by another paver's spade. Further along the same track, a different scene plays out. A farmer, shoulders stooped under a woolen cloak patched too many times to hold back the wind. His cart, piled high with sacks of barley for the abbey's grain, jostles with each rut that the paver has not yet patched. He knows every dip in the road, where the frost split the bank last winter, where the low hollow pools water if the ditch clogs. He mutters a small curse as one wheel jerks sideways, the axle groaning under the sudden shift. If the paver has passed this stretch, he says a grudging thanks, not aloud, but in the way he flicks the reins a little more gently, coaxing the beasts to trust that the stones will hold. At the toll gate near the bridge, a reeve counts each sack, each bundle, each wheel. Coins clink into a wooden coffer, vanishing toward the manor or the abbey's. The road is a vein, carrying not just travelers but coin, trickling in copper streams that rarely find their way back to the hands that lay the stones in the first place. Sometimes the road carries darker feet, a band of men who speak little, cloaks pulled low over eyes, drift down the lane at dusk. They have heard of a merchant's cart that will pass by moonrise, heavy with coin, the driver unguarded after the last bend, where the road skirts the wood. They know the track's secrets, the hollow where a man might wait unseeing, the patch where the wheels slow for a sudden dip. Such men do not think of the paver at all, but they know his work holds their own twisted trade aloft, just as it does the pilgrim's prayers. When the cart comes, the road does not flinch. The stones bear the weight of the struggle, the scuffle in the verge, the final hush when the driver's breath leaves him in the chill dawn. Later, the paver's spade might find the mark, a small groove where a blade struck stone, a copper coin pressed into the mud in the fight's last gasp. But the road keeps its own counsel. By the time the next wagon passes, the verge is closed over the tracks like a wound half-healed. So the road runs, carrying the noble's laughter and the thief's hush. the steward's coin, and the farmer's weary hope. It binds the whole to the fields, the marker to the manor, the shrine to the distant cathedral whose bells echo like a promise no paver will ever see in stone. They ride it in cloaks lined with fur. They tramp it in boots that split at the seam. They bless it with small prayers when it holds, curse it when the wheels sink deep in thought. Some scrawl complaints into ledgers, some never learn a letter. All of them leave a mark, a rut, a coin, a hush that drifts like mist along the ditch's edge. And beneath it all, the paver's swing of the hammer ties. These worlds together, the hall that feasts, the field that starves, the shrine that flickers with candles guttering in the wind. Imagine a day when the sky hangs low with swollen clouds, a mist curling over the hedgerows like damp wool draped on a line. A lord's coach gilt-hedged and drawn by 4 restless horses jolts to a halt at a stretch where the road has begun to soften into ruts the size of a man's boot. The driver curses under his breath. Inside the coach, the lord shifts, peering through the narrow window at the churned mud below. He knows this stretch well. It cuts a full day's ride from his manor to the cathedral where he hopes to speak with a bishop about a parcel of land. Every mile matters, yet here he is, wheels sinking like stones into a pond. Up ahead, a handful of road pavers, sleeves rolled high on weather-burnt arms, work to lay new gravel. They labor in the drizzle, boots caked in clay that clings like a second skin. One lifts his head when the driver calls out, asking how long the patch will hold. The paver shrugs, his voice calm, words chewed down to the bone by hours of labor. We tamped it deep last winter, but the frost took it back. By sunset, this stretch will hold again. The Lord's eyes meet the paver's for only a heartbeat, but in that moment 2 worlds flicker against each other. The gold thread on a cloak brushed against rough wool, a signet ring glinting against a hammer's worn handle. A coin changes hands, silver bright even in the dusk, and the coach jolts on, the horses urged into the next passable stretch. Behind them, the paver's hammer keeps tapping out its soft promise. The road will hold for a while longer. Picture an inn where the road forks toward 2 towns. By day, the yard is busy with carts, unloading sacks of grain, drovers tending weary animals, merchants haggling for a meal and a clean blanket. At night, the taproom fills with voices that roll together like the low hum of a distant river. Near the fire, a steward in fine boots leans over a trestle, sharing a jug of ale with a traveling merchant. His purse hangs from his belt, heavy with the manor's coins. A few tables away, paver's son sits hunched, sore from helping clear a fallen branch that blocked the track for half a day. Their words never cross. The steward discusses prices for wool bales, yet to be sheared, promising that the road will carry them quickly come summer. The merchant nods, thinking of the fresh barrels of dye he might trade at the next fair. The paver's lad keeps his head down, cradling a tankard bought with the copper here and that day. He listens, half dreaming, the flicker of the fire in his eyes, the same spark that catches on every story of roads beyond the next bend. For a moment, the warm hearth stitches them together. Steward, merchant, paver's boy, each one carrying the road inside him, whether he knows it or not. On another night, a wandering friar kneels by the roadside shrine where a single candle flickers inside a cracked clay lantern. He has walked since sunrise, his bare feet wrapped in rags where the leather wore thin miles back. He prays softly for the souls who passed this way. Not just the lords and pilgrims like himself, but the pavers too, though he knows few remember them by name. Not far down the track, a noble woman's retinue pauses at the same shrine. She stands in her fine riding boots, gloves drawn tight against the dusks, chill, and bows her head for a moment. Her prayers are for her child, small and pale at home in his cradle. She asks for safe passage, for the road to hold steady, for her journey's end to come without mishap. The friar watches her slip a coin at the base of the shrine, where other tokens gather like fallen leaves. He catches her eye as she steps back. For a breath, the noble and the barefoot pilgrim share the same hush, the same road beneath them, stones pressed flat by the same unseen hands. When she rides on, the friar lingers. He knows he will walk again tomorrow, and the road will remember his footprints long after they fade in the next rain. In the Lord's hall, the feast is loud. Laughter echoing off timber beams, dogs snuffling for scraps under the trestles. A bard sings of a great battle, of brave knights and shining banners carried across the land. He does not sing of the road that carried them there, nor the backs that bent to keep the wagons from sinking into spring's endless mud. In the shadows near the kitchen door, The paver's daughter waits, carrying in trenchers of bread. Her eyes flick to the bard's embroidered tunic, to the rich green cloak of the steward, nodding in time with the tune. She thinks of the road she crossed at dawn to fetch turnips from the croft. The same road where her father's hammer rang out in the frost. She will sleep tonight on a pallet by the hearth, the hush of footsteps on the flagstones merging with the echo of wheels rolling above the stones. Her family laid down. In the hush before sleep takes her, she knows. The feasting and the labor are bound together, held fast by the path that hums softly through it all. Once each season, the bishop's train wins its way down the same well-worn track. Flags snap in the wind. Horses step carefully to avoid slipping on the fresh-tamped gravel. Monks and clerks follow, their breath white in the cold. At the front, the bishop's litter sways, borne by strong shoulders, a canopy of velvet sheltering him from the dust. Children run to the verge, peering through hedges to catch a glimpse of the fine gold cloth, the polished cross that gleams in the bishop's gloved hands. They see the holiness, the wealth, but not the ditch the paver deepened weeks before to drain the spring rain, nor the milestone the paver's son scrubbed clean, so the monks might read their way clearly to the next parish. As the procession passes, the paver himself leans on his tamper, watching from the ditch's edge. He lifts his cap in greeting. A simple nod, a small recognition that the same road bears all things, great and small. When the last horse's hoof fades into the hush, he bends again, feet firm in the mud, stones waiting to be set just right. These meetings, the lady and the friar at the shrine, the steward's purse clinking near the paver's lad at the inn, the bishop's train rolling over freshly laid stones, never last long. But in each one, the truth glimmers. The road is not just a path underfoot, it is a loom that weaves the fine and the rough, the blessed and the bent, into a single stretch of ruts, gravel, and hope. None of them will remember each other's names. They will go on, feasting, praying, traveling on horses, or trudging behind oxen. But the hush beneath the road hums with their passing, the hidden pact that all these lives, however distant they seem, belong to the same endless line of footsteps and wheels. Picture the road just before dawn, when the mist clings low across the fields, and the hedgerows drip with last night's rain. No carts roll here yet, no clatter of hooves, no pilgrims' feet pressing prayers into the verge. For a breath, it is only a ribbon of quiet, the hush before the world stirs and tugs at its ruts once more. In the far manor house, a steward counts the day's coin beside a flickering candle. His pen scratches across parchment, marking tolls to be paid, rents to be gathered, all the thin lines that bind his lord's wealth to the far-flung villagers scattered like islands beyond the mist. In the paver's small cottage, a boy tugs on cracked leather boots, still stiff from drying by the hearth. His mother smooths his hair, presses a crust of bread into his hand, and sends him down the track where the older men wait, tools balanced on shoulders like the weight of the world itself. Both the steward and the boy know the road's shape, but in different ways. For one, it is a line on a map, drawn from tollgate to market square. For the other, it is mud that clings to skin, stone that grates under nails, the cold slap of ditch water when the bank caves in. Neither thinks much of the other. Yet, as the sun lifts its first pale rays over the head, they are already tied together by this stretch of track that hums softly beneath them both. By midwinter, the Lord's Hall brims with warmth. A feast glows under candlelight, wine passed from hand to hand, a boar's head carried in on a platter, the smell of cloves and roasted apples filling the smoky rafters. Outside, the road lies frozen, ruts hard as stone. A messenger, muffled in a cloak too thin for the frost, leans against the gate, catching his breath before he is called into the hall. He has ridden half the night hooves, striking sparks from the packed stones where the road holds firm despite the ice. He will be given a corner by the hearth, perhaps a scrap of meat and a tankard of ale, but his mind stays on the next mile he must ride when the dawn comes. Not far away, the paver's family gathers around their own hearth. No feast, just a pot of thin broth, the scent of smoke in the walls like an old cloak wrapped tight against the cold. They know the road lies locked in frost tonight, its ruts harmless for now, its ditches frozen, but they know too that when the thaw comes, the packed stones will heave and shift, and the hammer must ring again. They do not hear the Lord's laughter rising into the rafters, nor the song the bard spins about ancient kings and fine conquests, but the hush under the road remembers both, the warmth of the feast and the cold ache of waiting for the thaw. Once a wealthy merchant, his cart heavy with fine salt and woven cloth, found himself mired at the low dib near the old oak, a stretch where the ditch had clogged with fallen branches and the spring rain turned the track into a sucking bog. He cursed the road, spat at the mud that reached for his oxen's hooves, threatened to find the pavers for neglect. But by dusk, it was a bent-backed man and his son who arrived with shovels and a pry-bar, working by the faint glow of a tallow lantern. They laid fresh brush under the wheels, spread gravel dredged from the ditch's edge, coaxed the cart free inch by inch until the wheels bit firm ground once more. When it was done, the merchant pressed a coin into the man's palm. Enough for a day's bread, no more. He climbed onto his seat, clucked his tongue at the oxen, and rattled on toward the next market town. In the hush after the lantern was snuffed, the paver wiped his hands on his breeches, feeling the mud cake under his nails. He said nothing. He knew the road gives and takes. Coin for labor, pride for comfort, and always another rut waiting when the next storm comes. Further along the same stretch, the road leads pilgrims to the great abbey that rises above the marshes, its towers pale against the sky. They come in ragged lines. Peasants who sold their last hens for a candle at the high altar. Merchants who drop a silver coin into the poor box to buy back a conscience scuffed by too many hard bargains. Their boots drag through the same ruts that the noble's coach glides over days later. Their breath mists the stones where the merchant's oxen plodded last spring. The abbey's bells ring out over all of them, a blessing carried on wind that sweeps across the same patched ditches. The paver's spade carved again and again. The monk who tends the sacristy knows of the road only when the lay brothers complain that the food wagons arrive late because the bridge's approach washed out in the thaw. He crosses himself, prays for the safe passage of souls, and forgets again the backs that bend to fill that gap with gravel and hope. Yet the hush beneath the stones keeps the echo of every prayer, every coin dropped into the cold hands of a road-worn beggar, every quiet swing of the hammer that stitched a path firm enough for the bells to be heard at all. One bright spring morning, a wedding party winds its way down the road from the manor to the small church at the village's edge. A boy tosses flower petals from a wicker basket, though the breeze scatters them into the ditch, before they reach the bride's path. At the crossroads, the pavers stand aside to watch, boots still wet from draining the bank where last week Esray nearly carved a new rut to swallow the cart that carries the dowry chest. They lean on their spades, hats in hand, offering a respectful nod as the party passes. The young lord and his bride smile, though their eyes do not linger on the men at the verge. They will step onto the church threshold with dry boots, say their vows on flagstones that never remember the mud they left behind. Behind them, the pedals float down into the ditch, coming to rest in a place where the paver's blade bit deep only hours before dawn. The hush beneath the road holds these two small promises, pressed like seeds into the damp earth. Sometimes when the last cart has rolled away and dusk settles like breath on the stones, the road feels the weight of every footstep it has carried. The noble's polished boot, the merchant's mud-spattered shoe, the paver's bare heel when he crosses his stretch before first light. In that soft dark, there is no steward, no beggar, no lord. There is only the hush, the memory of the hammer's steady swing, the prayer whispered at the shrine, the coin pressed into the mud by a wheel that struck a rut too deep to hold. And though none would admit it aloud, each one knows that without that hush beneath the road, the hall's feast would starve, the market would fall silent, the abbey's bells would ring out to no one at all. Closing, the road's final whisper no. Let the hammer rest. Let the tamper stand propped against the old oak. Let the ditch lie still for the night, its water whispering down to the fields, and soft trickles that carry away the weight of another day as labor. Picture the paver's tools lined along the wall of his cottage. The handle of the hammer smooth, where his palm carved its memory into the wood. The blade of the spade nicked from roots and stubborn stones. The tamper's head worn round from countless strikes that pressed the world, firm beneath passing feet. He sleeps now, just as you drift toward sleep, his shoulders slack, the ache in his joints fading for a few hours into the hush that fills the corners of the cottage when the fire burns low. The road lies quiet outside. No carts rattling past, no hoofbeats stirring the gravel. Even the wind rests, pressed flat against the hedge, and beneath it all, the road hums softly. The same way it always has. It holds the weight of kings' carriages and pilgrims' bare feet, merchants' wagons heavy with trade, and children's laughter skimming along the ditch's edge like birdsong at dawn. Each stone set in the track bears more than the scrape of wheels and hooves. It bears the hush of stories left behind, a coin pressed into the clay for luck, a charm dropped at the crossroads and forgotten, a patch of frost that lifted the gravel only to be tamped down again by patient hands before the next cart passed by. Think of that. How every journey, whether clad in silk or rough homespun, slides over the same thin skin of earth. The steward at the manor, the merchant counting coins by candlelight, the barefoot friar trudging toward the cathedral bells, each one carried by the same hush beneath the ruts, each one leaving a mark that fades into the clay. The Paver knew this, in the quiet way that men who bend their backs to the world's work often know things no scribe will ever write. He never asked to be remembered in the steward's ledgers or in the bishop's roll of blessings. He knew that the road itself was enough, that the hush beneath the stones would hold his story, pressed deep where the rain could not wash it away. Somewhere in that soft hush where sleep finds you, the road lies waiting, a ribbon winding through fields, still heavy with the promise of spring rains, through villages stitched together by ditch and milestone, through kingdoms whose borders shift but whose ruts remain. It holds the ghost of the paver's hammer, that steady, patient beat that tamped down more than gravel. It pressed the worry from the merchant's mind when the wheels turned true. It steadied the noble's gallop when urgent news flew on hoofbeat. It cushioned the pilgrim's weary feet when prayers alone could not bear him the last mile. No statue marks this labor. No stone cross stands over the paver's resting place. But every mile of road that holds firm beneath the weight of wagons is its own quiet monument. A promise that sweat and skill given freely can shape a world that carries more than the ones who claim to rule it. So breathe deep and feel that hush settle into your bones. Let the cartwheels fade, the hooves soften to a gentle echo, the hammer's ring melt into a lullaby that drifts across the clay. Somewhere beyond this night, the road waits, ready to carry you again tomorrow, each step pressing softly into the hidden layer that holds your story too. The ruts will come, the frost will lift the stones, the ditch will need cutting once more, and the world will turn, and the hush beneath the road will hold it all. For now, the paver's work is done, the road lies quiet, and so, softly, do you. Segment 5. The road through the seasons. Imagine the road in the first grip of winter, not yet buried in snow but stiff and sharp. Underfoot the ruts frozen into ridges that catch the pale morning light like a blade's edge. Dawn comes late and slow, sliding across the hedgerows with a silver gleam that lingers on every branch. The paver stands at the edge of the track, boots planted firm, where the ditch begins its quiet run. He feels the frost's bite in the soles of his boots, the cold climbing up through his spine. Yet for now, the road holds firm, each stone locked in place by the hard hand of winter. In this season, the hammer hangs mostly quiet. There is no tamping of soft clay, no digging out of fresh ruts turned to soup by spring rains. Instead, he tends to the ditch's line, clearing it of leaves that blew down from the hedgerows when autumn sighed its last breath. He pries free small branches that lie like splinters against the frozen flow, so that when the thaw comes, the water will have somewhere to go. Sometimes a cart rattles past, its iron rims clanking sharp against the frozen ruts. The driver leans forward on the reins, breath misting out in quick clouds. If he sees the paver at all, he raises a hand in greeting, a quiet nod that says, "Keep it steady for me," even if no words pass his lips. Farther down the road, where the track widens near the village, a market stirs. Traders stand close together, stamping feet against the frozen ground, pulling mittens tight over raw fingers. The winter sun spills a weak light across barrels of salted fish, cloth sacks of grain, stacked like small hills beside the wagons. A merchant leans against his cart's wheel, watching his oxen snort into the crisp air. He thanks the road, in his own way, for holding firm enough that the heavy cart did not sink halfway from the last village. He knows, though he may never say it aloud, that this patch owes its strength to the paver who tamped it flat before the frost came, binding clay and stone tight enough to withstand the night's grip. A boy dashes past the stalls, arms full of rushes for the cottage floors. He pauses at the track's edge, hopping from one frozen rut to the next, boots scuffing the hard gravel. He does not see the hush that lies beneath the stones, or feel the old frost waiting to thaw and shift. But the road holds him just the same. When the thaw comes, it begins with a whisper, a drip from the thatch, a soft trickle in the ditch that had slept under ice for weeks. Beneath the surface, The frost heaves begin their quiet mischief. Stones shift, packed clay buckles where the frozen water now sighs back into the ruts. The paver feels it in the soles of his boots before the first wheel carves a muddy groove where last week there was none. He grips his hammer once more, testing the ground with a cautious boot heel. Where the earth squelches, he marks it in his mind. Where the ditch threatens to spill, he notes the bank that must be shored up before the water turns the track to soup. The thaw is not loud. There is no rush of spring bird song yet, no burst of blossom along the hedges. It is a slow unwinding, a quiet creak as the earth loosens its iron grip, a hush as the road's hunger stirs. In the village, children peer down from a small footbridge, watching the water swirl beneath where the ditch feeds the stream. They toss pebbles in, giggling when they vanish into the muddy flow. The paver lifts his cap to them as he passes Spade balanced on his shoulder, the tamper's worn handle bumping gently against his hip. A stretch near the bend has begun to sink. He stands there now, boots braced in soft muck that sucks at the leather, feeling the earth shift under his weight like the belly of something half. He lifts the first stones from a nearby pile, settles them into the hollow, tests the lay with his heel. He works alone for an hour before the boy arrives. The same boy who skipped across the frozen ruts last month. Now his boots are caked with clay up to the laces, his sleeves damp with the work. Together they pack brush and gravel into the hollow, laying each stone like a small promise. The road will hold again. Maybe not forever, but long enough for the next cart to pass without sinking to its axle, for the next pilgrim's feet to find dry ground where the path dips slow. With spring's thaw, travelers drift back along the road's length. Pilgrims clutch walking sticks smoothed by miles, satchels slung across thin shoulders. Merchants guide their wagons around the soft bends, urging oxen forward where the ground threatens to pull them sideways into the verge. They see the paver bent to his work. Some nod. A few toss him a coin, a heel of bread wrapped in cloth. Small tokens for the labor that holds their journeys together. They do not linger. The road carries them on, and soon the hush beneath the stones gathers their passing footsteps into its long memory. At night, when the sky stays pale far longer than it did in winter, the paver sits by the hearth, boots drying near the embers. He rubs his shoulders, feeling each knot of muscle earned by the thaw's stubborn work. His son sleeps in the corner, the shape of tomorrow's labor already waiting for him in the soft hush under his dreams. Outside, the road breathes again. The ditch runs clear. The frost lies beaten back for another season. By late spring, the hedgerows come alive. Tiny leaves trembling in the breeze, small white blossoms clinging to the black. The road dries in patches, the damp clay giving way to dust that clings to a passing wheel, then drifts back down to settle in the cracks between the stones. Children follow lambs across the verge, their laughter skipping ahead of them like birds darting in and out of hedges. A paver's hammer rings faintly in the distance, striking a slab into place on a stretch that washed away when the thaw turned fierce. Travelers feel the road's promise under their feet. Firm again, steady enough for carts laden with early greens, baskets of eggs, cloth, sacks of herbs, bound for the market. But beneath every step, the hush remains. The secret layer that knows this spring's warmth will not last forever. Another frost will come, another thaw, another season when the hammer must sing its steady lullaby back into the stones. Picture the road in the height of summer, not the chill hush of frost or the wet sigh of thaw, but a long, slow exhale of warmth that settles into every hedge and ditch. The stones feel different underfoot now. They hold the sun's heat long after dusk falls, radiating a low, comforting warmth that seeps into the soles of every boot that treads this path. A merchant's wagon rattles lazily down the track, iron rims striking sparks from the driest patches of gravel. Dust lifts with each turn of the wheels, a soft haze that clings to breeches and tunics alike. The paver stands at the verge, cap pushed back on his brow, sleeves rolled high over forearms browned by the sun. A bead of sweat slides down his temple as he studies the stretch ahead, a place where the dry earth has begun to crack, forming hairline fissures that promise trouble when the storms come. His son sits a few paces away, stripping the bark from a length of willow cut to brace a patch of bank that threatens to slide. The boy hums under his breath, the same tune his grandfather once whistled when the hammer rang out over the frost-hardened road in winters long past. Down the road, the fields shimmer with barley, almost ready to cut. Carts creak out from the village at first light, axles groaning under the weight of scythes, baskets, and the promise of grain to fill the manors. At the same time, travelers trickle through, pilgrims bound for shrines, children trailing behind drovers who urge small herds of sheep onward, voices rising like birdsong in the still, hot air. The road carries them all without complaint. Its dust coats the hems of their tunics, drifts into the cracks in their boots, sticks to the sweat at the crook of every elbow. No one curses. Dust, not truly. It is summer's proof that the track is holding, that the ditch has done its work, that the rain has not yet come to stir the clay into ruts that might trap a wheel or drown a weary traveler's feet. When dusk settles in, the paver sits at the edge of the field, watching the wagons roll past. He lifts his cap to the carter who nods in return. A small exchange, one laborer to another, each knowing how the other's back bends under the sun's patient weight. But summer does not last without mischief. Thunderheads gather at the far edge of the fields, swelling up behind the low hills until they tower like fortress walls in the sky. A hush falls across the head. Birds slip deep into the brambles. Even the children's laughter near the ditch fades, replaced by the distant rumble that shakes the warm dust from the road's skin. The first drops come as fat, warm splashes, the smell of earth rising to greet the rain with an old, grateful sigh. But soon the sky's mercy turns to force. Water carves channels through the dry verge, dragging loose gravel down into the ditch. The paver watches the edges for weak spots, knowing the water's hunger can be fierce. By dawn, the storm has passed. But the road remembers. Small hollows hold puddles that glisten like mirrors in the early light. Clods of clay have slipped from the bank where the roots gave way. Stones that sat tight and steady under summer's heat now lie scattered, the hush beneath them stirred by the storm's impatient fingers. The paver rolls up his sleeves again. He lifts his temper, nudging each piece back into place, pressing the world firm once more, a promise that the road will hold until the next thundercloud drifts over the fields. As the last heat of summer lingers in the head, a line of monks files down the road toward the abbey that rises pale and wide against the sky. They walk barefoot, robes brushing the dust from the verge, voices joined in a soft chant that drifts behind them like a ribbon on the breeze. Their feet find the stones, the paver set in the hush before dawn. Each pilgrim feels the firmness beneath their soles, though they do not know the ditches, depth, or the tamp's steady press. They only know the road carries them forward. From the distant village where they gathered at first light to the abbey's high doors where prayers will echo in the cool hush of stone walls. The paver stands aside to watch them pass. He dips his head when the last monk lifts a hand in blessing, not for the stones themselves, but for the quiet that binds each footstep to the hush beneath the earth. He feels it, even if the world above him barely sees. When the sun glows long into late evening, children creep back to the road's edge to play their games. They race barefoot along the verge, feet slapping the packed clay, laughter carrying through the hedgerows like the hum of bees. Sometimes they drop coins, tiny copper pennies meant for sweet treats from a cart that never arrived, or small trinkets scavenged from the market square. These treasures roll into the shallow ditch, glinting faintly in the last golden light before the grass and silt swallow them whole. The paver knows they are there, little offerings to the road's endless appetite. He smiles when he finds them, but never keeps them for himself. He presses them deeper into the bank with the flat of his spade, the way his father did, and his father's father before him. Small, hidden seeds of luck for the road to hold. And then, almost without notice, the heat slips away. The wind shifts, carrying the sharp edge of change through the hedges. Leaves yellow at their tips. The first cold rain blows in under low, grey skies. The paver stands at the bend near the milestone, where the cartwheels always dig the deepest grooves. He feels the earth soften beneath his boots. The ditch runs thicker now, its water dark with fallen leaves and bits of bark. He pries loose the branches, clears the mud that tries to dam the flow. Each stroke of his spade is careful, steady, a reminder that autumn's rain must find its way along the path he cuts, not carve its own. Merchants hurry to finish their trades before the road sinks under the weight of too much water. Pilgrims clutch their cloaks tight, heads bent against the drizzle that taps their shoulders like the soft hand of a mother, urging them forward. Beneath each step, the hush holds steady. It gathers the rustle of rain against the hedges, the creak of cartwheels that struggle through the first true mud. It hums to the paver, who listens without needing to speak. A pact between earth and stone, labor and prayer. By night, when the chill seeps through the shutters, the paver's family sits close to the hearth. They pass bread from hand to hand, thin broth in a battered bowl. Outside, the rain rattles on the thatch, drips into the barrels set to catch what might be needed when the ditch runs low again. He wipes his hands on his breeches, rough palms catching on frayed seams. He knows tomorrow the ditch will ask for more. A slip of bank here, a patch of verge there. He knows the hammer will ring out once more, striking the hush beneath the stones with its quiet promise. The children curl close, eyes heavy with dreams they do not yet understand, dreams that carry the hush inside them, the secret breath of the road that waits, patient as winter's frost, for the seasons to turn again. Picture the road now, a few weeks deeper into autumn's gentle unraveling. The leaves drift down in small, patient flurries, catching in the ditches, gathering against milestone, stones half buried where the verge meets the track. The mornings come slow and grey, mist curling off the fields to settle in the hollows, where the road dips low. The paver stands at the bend near the willows, the same stretch he patched through spring's thaw, the same bank he braced in summer's storms. Now he tests it with the heel of his boot, feeling the mud's soft give under a thin crust of clay. He knows this season by its quiet tricks. Water does not roar like it does in spring. Instead, it creeps in, steady trickles, seeping beneath the stones, teasing loose what was once packed firm. A wagon wheel cuts a rut, a fraction deeper each day. A rut that might become a trap for the first heavy cart if he does not mind its hunger. He lifts the spade, clearing the ditch where the fallen leaves form a depth. Each clump of rotting gold slides into the flow, carried downstream toward the meadow beyond the track. He watches the water find its rhythm again, a thin, clean hush threading through the hush beneath the stones. Down the road, the village fair bustles in the soft chill. Stalls stand, crooked along the green, their canvas, flaps snapping in the breeze. Apples bob in barrels, roots spill from baskets, skeins of homespun wool lie stacked on rough trestles, ready to warm shoulders through the coming frost. The road hums with life. Farmers leading bleating goats, boys chasing each other through the ruts, mothers with baskets brimming with turnips and sweet cakes wrapped in cloth. The Paver's family stands near the cider barrow, a rare chance to taste the season's bounty. Tart and sweet, the warmth of the cup fighting back the edge of the wind. He watches the carts roll in, each wheel pressing a new scar into the soft verge. He sees the merchant counting coins at his stall, the steward's son darting through the crowd, eyes sharp for a stolen jug or an unpaid bushel. They do not think of the ditch that keeps this track passable or the stones that will hold under the frost to come. But the paver thinks of it. And as the fair ends and the wagons groan back down the road, he feels the hush beneath the earth welcome every jolt of the wheels gathering the weight of grain and laughter alike. A week later, the first real frost arrives like a breath held too long. It creeps in with the dawn, turning the roadside grass brittle and pale. Fog curls over the fields, so thick that the road vanishes a few paces ahead. A pale strip of hush that might lead anywhere. The paver's boots crunch through the frozen verge. He lifts his lamp to catch the shape of the ditch's edge, checking where the water has begun to slow. The stones feel tight under his feet, bound by the frost's cold hand. For now, they hold fast, a firm skin stretched over the shifting belly of the earth. A lone traveler passes, leading a mule that snorts at the frozen air. They nod to each other. Two shapes half swallowed by the fog. The man's feet slip once, finding the old rut that the paver filled last month. The traveler catches his balance and moves on without a word, but the hush beneath the road feels the press of his step, stores it away with every other passing soul. In the low inn at the crossroads, a handful of carters gather around the hearth, boots steaming as the frost melts from their soles. Their breath fogs the air as they trade scraps of news. A fair gone well, a wheel that cracked near the ford, a patch of road near the manor that might not hold if the rain freezes there. The paver's son sits at the end of the bench, his shoulders dusted with clay that never truly leaves his tunic, no matter how hard his mother scrubs. He hears the worry in the carters' voices. The road is the line between a good season and a lost one. A single patch of sunken clay can break an axle, lose a barrel, turn a man's fortune to ruin before winter has even begun. He remembers the mark his father made near the ford, the low bend where the bank slips under heavy rain. He knows that come the next thaw, or the next day if the frost softens, the tamper must press that earth firm again. He does not speak up. He simply finishes his bread, lifts his hood, and slips out into the cold hush that waits beyond the inn door. The same hush that hums beneath the boots of every man who will ride out before dawn. By late autumn, the wind rises more often. It tugs at the bare branches overhead, sweeps the last scraps of leaves into the ditches, hums along the milestones like a voice half lost in the darkness. The road feels the wind's touch too. Dust gone, now replaced by a fine silt that runs like silk under a cartwheel, slipping down into the smallest cracks. The paver knows these cracks well. He kneels to trace them with rough fingertips, feeling where the frost will bite deepest when the cold settles in for good. He packs brush into the deepest rut, stones over that, tamped with the steady rhythm that has carried his family's name down generations. He does not pause when the wind cuts at his cheek or when the rain begins its soft, cold tapping on the back of his neck. His son waits nearby, holding the spade upright like a staff in the mist. The boy does not yet know how the road breathes, how it shifts under the seasons, how the hush beneath the stones keeps every cart from sinking, every pilgrim from turning back in fear. But he feels it all the same, in the shape of the tamper's handle, in the way his father's shoulders bend but never break. One morning, the snow comes. Not a heavy fall, but a thin veil that drifts across the hedgerows, softening the ruts, hiding the smallest hollows. Footsteps sound different now, muffled and shy. The hush beneath the road wrapped in a blanket of white. A lone rider picks his way down the lane, horse-breathing clouds into the crisp dawn. He leans forward to peer at the mile marker, its carving half buried under a drift. He does not see the coins that lie below the marker S-base. Small offerings pressed there in warmer months, now sleeping under frost. The paver watches from the cottage door, boots braced against the threshold. He knows the road lies calm tonight. The frost holds the stones tight. The ditch sleeps under a skin of ice that will not burst until the sun climbs higher in the sky. For a while, at least, the world's weight will slide gently above, each hoof and wheel cushioned by the hush beneath. In the hush of this first snow, the road's breath slows, like a sleeper, chest rising and falling beneath a thick blanket. The paver sets his tools aside for now, hands wrapped around a cup of broth while the hearth hums at his back. Outside, the track lies ready, a promise to hold through the coldest nights, to stir awake again when the thaw returns. Each frost and thaw is a turning wheel, the same circle he has walked since his feet were small enough to sink into the ditch's soft bank. The hush beneath the stones keeps every promise. It holds the wheel ruts, the footprints, the marks of the hammer swing. It holds the prayers whispered by pilgrims, the curses muttered by carters, the quiet thanks offered by those who ride too fast to see the ditch's depth or the stone's patient song. And when spring stirs the frost loose once more, the paver's boots will press into the same old clay, the tamper will find its rhythm again, and the hush will gather every step into its endless memory. A circle unbroken, a road that never forgets. Picture the road now, lying under the full weight of winter. Snow covers its ruts, like a quilt tucked tight by careful hands. The milestones stand half buried in drifts, their carved letters softened by frost that glitters in the pale morning sun. At dawn, the world seems still. Hoofbeats do not echo sharply as they did on summer ice-packed clay. Now they land in muffled thuds, the horse's breath steaming out in soft puffs that drift across the hedgerows. In the paver's cottage, the hearth sighs with a slow, constant flame. Boots line the wall, thick with dried mud now frozen solid. The hammer leans by the door, its handle wrapped with a scrap of cloth where the wood is worn smooth. It rests for a while now. The frost has locked the stones so tightly that they need no tampering until the thaw stirs them loose again. The hush beneath the road, too, lies still. It holds its breath beneath the snow, a deep, steady hum that promises, I am here. I will hold until the sun returns. Now and then, a lone figure appears through the falling flakes. A carter, bundled in wool, flicks the reins over his horse's broad back. The wagon creaks in protest, iron rims grumbling against the frozen ruts. He knows each dip and bend by heart, but still he blesses the hush beneath the stones when the wheels do not catch or break, when the ditch carries the meltwater away before it can freeze in cruel hidden hollows. He passes a milestone nearly swallowed by snow. Once, he leaned against that very stone on a stormy night, waiting for the paver's boy to wedge brush under his stuck wheel. The coin he pressed into that boy's hand is long spent on bread and broth, but the hush beneath the milestone remembers. Not the coin itself, but the small promise, made and kept. As he rides on, the carter lifts his hand in a half-salute to the stretch ahead. A small, silent thanks to a man he does not see, and to the hush that holds him steady between village and home. At the bend where three tracks meet, the small roadside shrine sags under the snow's gentle weight. Its crude wooden cross leans slightly now, frost clinging to the grain like silver lace. A scrap of cloth, tied there last spring by a passing pilgrim, flutters once in the wind, stiff and tattered, yet still there. The paver stands by it at dusk. He lifts his cap for a moment, letting the cold bite at the edge of his ear. He knows the stories that linger here. Of souls lost to the roads, hidden hungers, of travelers who found their prayers answered when the ditch held and the stones stayed true through the worst storms. He bends to brush the snow from the shrine's base. There, half buried, lies the faint gleam of an old coin, copper turned green at the edges. He presses it deeper into the frozen earth, not to take it for himself, but to let the road swallow it whole. One more small wish stitched into the hush that waits beneath the frost. When the road holds steady through winter, the paver finds small moments to rest. He sits by the hearth, cup warm in his hands, the children curled against his sides. They ask him for stories, not of kings or battles, but of the road itself. He tells them, in that slow, low voice, shaped by long days of swinging the tamper, how the frost lifts stones from their beds, how the thaw tries to steal the clay from beneath the cartwheels. He tells them how the ditch hums with melt water in spring, how summer's dust hides tiny secrets in its drift, how autumn's rain tests every promise the stones can make. He tells them that beneath it all, the hush keeps each step. The merchant's heavy boots, the noble's polished shoe, the pilgrim's bare heel, the child's quick skip along the verge. The road remembers them all, not with words carved in stone, but with the steady press of each life into the soft, secret layer beneath. As winter reaches its deepest quiet, the road sleeps. Yet, even in this sleep, it listens. The hush beneath the stones, gathering the faint crunch of passing feet, the slow drip of icicles melting on a warmer day. When the sun climbs higher, when a breeze hints at the distant thaw, the road stirs. A trickle begins in the ditch, dark and thin, winding around dead leaves frozen in its path. The frost still holds, but just beneath it, the hush shifts. A soft, patient promise that the wheel will turn again. The paver feels it, too. Before the first true thaw, he wakes before dawn to the hush of dripping eaves, the faint smell of damp earth rising where the frost loosens its grip. He lifts his hammer, tests its weight, knows the circle will begin once more. Frost to thaw, thaw to mud, mud to stone, stone to frost. The hush beneath the road gathers his quiet breath, storing it away with every promise that came before. Picture that stretch of road now, a line of ruts pressed flat by last summer, as now hidden under snow that glows gold at the edge where the sun touches it. Beyond the bend, the fields wait for the plow, roots still dreaming beneath the frozen crust. A pilgrim's path winds across the verge, boot prints crisp and deep, each step carrying a hope soft for any scribe's pen. A child's laugh echoes somewhere at the far edge, carried by the wind that slips under cottage doors and into half-warmed dreams. In the hush beneath the road, the stones remember every wheel that will come, every hammer that will strike, every blessing and curse whispered as boots tread the old, patient clay. One day, the paver's own steps will fade, the hammer's handle will rest in another's hands, his son, perhaps, or the boy who once watched from the ditch's edge as the tamper rose and fell, tamping the hush into place. The road will not say his name aloud, but every cart that passes smooth, every boot that finds firm footing after the thaw, will speak it in their own quiet way. The hush beneath the stones is his story. Not a song sung by bards in the manor hall, but a truth pressed deep where the rain cannot wash it away. And so, the circle breathes. Frost to thaw, thaw to flood, flood to dust, dust to rain. And back again, the hush gathering each season is passing like a lullaby meant only for those who listen with the soles of their feet. Final thoughts. The road's last lullaby, so here you lie now, where the world grows quiet and the fire burns low, and the hush beneath the stones waits, unchanged, unhurried, unspoken. Somewhere far from your warm bed, the road lies under frost, or rain, or summer dust. It does not matter. It is always there, breathing beneath the weight of wheels, the press of feet, the slow passage of seasons that turn and turn but never truly end. In your mind's eye, you might still see the paver standing at the bend, shoulders stooped just enough to show you the cost of each mile tamped flat. You might hear the echo of his hammer, the slow drag of his spade clearing the ditch. So, the springus wild flood does not steal away what he laid with such care. Or maybe you see the noble on his palfrey, the merchant counting his coin, the barefoot child tracing ruts with his small, curious toes, all of them carried by the same hush that hums beneath every stone. What they never see, what you now carry with you, is the hidden promise pressed deep into the clay, that even when no one notices, the road remembers. It remembers the frost and the thaw, the thunder of hooves, and the hush of prayers whispered at a crooked shrine. It remembers the small coin dropped in thanks, the soft curse when a wheel sticks, the small laugh of a child splashing in the ditch when the summer heat runs high. And so you, too, are part of this quiet story. Your thoughts drifting like wagon wheels over packed gravel, your breath rising and falling like mist across the verge. The hush beneath the stones holds you as gently as it holds the paver's mark, the pilgrim's step, the merchant's weight, the noble's pride. Sleep now, and let your dreams settle into that deep layer, the hidden road that hums with every season's turning. Let the hush remind you that you are carried, always, by labors seen and unseen, by promises made and kept in silence, by patient hands that tamp down the restless earth and tell it softly. And in the morning, when you rise and take your first step into the world again, you'll know, somewhere beneath your feet, the hush keeps you steady, one stone at a time. Good night. May the road hold you, always.